Hi, this is Red, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Right, I'm here for another episode of Reflections, and my guest for this one is going to be Miss Harvey, who, believe it or not, is actually someone I've known probably 20 years, so it's actually nice to do a piece of content with you.
I know. I still remember our first moment together. I think it was in Paris, if I'm not mistaken. Back then, you worked for SK, I think, right? And I was on SK, so...
Yes. Actually, by the way, to start out with, that's even an interesting detail, just to sort of establish for people who you are. You're obviously from Montreal, Quebec, the French part of Canada. And so one thing a lot of people might not know, maybe if they're American, is when you used to go to Paris and go to all these ESWC tournaments, well, obviously they speak French, but I've heard they were even being like snooty to you and being like, oh, we can't understand your accent or whatever. Is it true? Were they sort of like being harsh to you because you had a different accent?
I think so, but in 2007 I moved there, and so I learned how to adapt my accent.
Right.
But before that, when we met, I didn't know how to adapt it yet, and so I looked like a bit like a how can I describe it? Like someone from the farm town,
right? Rural, sure.
Yeah, rural. But I think now I have the ability to just turn it on and off, and so when I meet with the French guys that I know over there in CS. I'll turn it on just a little bit.
Yeah, because actually this is one place we can immediately start the interview. If people don't know, there's two details I want to bring up about you, which is one, since you come from the Quebec scene, if people don't know, that actually had a very healthy like local land scene where, I know a lot of the men used to go to the local like tournaments where you win the $100, $200 or a mouse mat or whatever. And actually within that, your first team, people will know you from the American teams and the big squads you were at ESWC with them when we were French teams. But actually you came up in like Canadian teams, right? You had a bunch of local people that you knew, right? So actually being from Quebec's like a big part of your kind of like heritage in CS, right?
It's so weird to know, but if you know anything about the history of other games, you might not know, for example, that one of the first StarCraft professional players is from Quebec.
Oh, right,
Guillaume Patrick, and I don't think I've ever told you this, okay, but he was born 2 streets away from me.
Oh, wow.
And so, the craziness of how there's so many people from Quebec who became professional gamers way before it was a thing is so real. Like, it's so weird. In Call of Duty, there was Raymond Rainbow, also close to where I'm from. Like, there was so many players from our neighborhood, and just it's just kind of crazy. So in Quebec, LAN parties, and it might have been like that in the UK, but there was like a LAN party every 2 months.
Oh, wow,
big one. Like between 500 to 1,000 players, right? Every 2-3 months. And it was all like driving distance. So when I was 16, 17, I was to pack my CRT, my big screen, in a car with friends, and I would drive there, and just like anybody at that age that didn't have any money, and I would sleep right under the table.
Right, like the meme. Sure.
Yeah. And at first, I really was kind of a cheerleader following my guy friends from my local town. And so they would compete in the Counter-Strike tournament at 1.5 at the time. And I would just play next to them as a 6th man, but I wasn't really like playing. And I was just like hanging out, and I was 17.
By the way, along those lines, I saw actually one of your earliest teams was like a Canadian team of players. So one thing that shocked me was, in this era, I'm used to it being where the famous women in the scene are like the one woman in the room usually, or like you say, they know some other player or something. Like, you actually managed to find a whole group of people who are Canadian girls to make a team with. How did you do that?
Yeah, and when I was going to these events, there was other women there. Maybe we were like 10 out of 1,000, and they would. At some point, there was a women's team who reached out, was like, we want to play with you. And they were like the sidekick team of the best French Canadian team. Right. And so that's how I started. Oh, wow. Okay. I could play with other women and not just be a mascot. And which is why I think representation is so important, because I don't know if I would have ever had the guts to like join a regular team if like another woman wasn't like, don't worry, we got this. We'll show you how to join a server and not just a public server, all that kind of stuff in the early 2000s. And we created this woman squad, and there was 2 French Canadian woman squad who were like trying to be the best.
Wow, okay. Was there a rivalry?
Team. Yeah, there was like a rivalry of like Yeah. And so we would go to LANs and kind of try to make it as far as we could in the open brackets versus the boys. I've always played versus in the main event my whole career.
Yeah.
And whether it was on a mixed team or on a women's team, but and then at some point it became Toronto, it became New York, and then I was part of the circuit.
Along these lines, by the way, if anyone's ever seen, you've done some content with me in the past. Like we did actually an esports salon episode that was about women in esports and sort of like trying to get people's experience out there. One thing I've always appreciated is that you're actually a very honest person. Like even though you might say some things people think are political, actually I've found you are someone who does speak to your own experience. So when you say that, one thing I've actually kind of tried to change people's mind about is men and women clearly are different, and what we need and what we want and how we approach the world is different. So one thing I think people do misunderstand is I have found that a lot of the women I've known in esports, even some, by the way, like the best in the world at their job, like Shocks from League of Legends and stuff, actually they do seem like they're not the sort of people where like they can just be on their own. They need people to actually give them encouragement and sort of tell them that they're going, and give them almost like an affirmation that they should keep going. Would you agree with this? Is this something that's important to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think at the beginning, I needed these kind of like, oh, I can make it too. I can do it too. I needed a push. I think nowadays, when I look back, what I don't realize is there was barely any push. And I was like, I'm going to grab on that push and then change the world kind of thing. Whether it's right now I want to say an executive in an esports team in NA, or when I was competing, there was barely a little bit of a push. I saw a tournament, there was women in it, and I'm like, I'm gonna make a team and compete as Team Canada and be there, so it was like barely like a light in the dark, and I just like zone in. But I don't know if I didn't have that little tiny light, if I would have ever been in gaming. So for me, that's why it's important, because I know I'm a stubborn person. I'm a dedicated person. I'm a passionate person, but not everybody needs to be that way to succeed, right? I think in a space where it's often hard to find your space, just in general,
of course,
not just women, right? Even for you as a journalist, it's fucking hard nowadays to make it in that space. And so when you can find these little lights that can give you inspiration, that can give you a little bit of a boost, I think that's so important.
Let me ask you this question. That's like how you thought about your game. Were you actually good in the early days? Did you have like a talent for CS early on?
Well, I remember the first 6 months I was goddamn awful. Like I've never played a shooter before, so I would like look up, down, and it was like a mess. But I think I was being told I sucked so much, and when I started playing with these other women, I realized I was already like the best of the group.
Oh wow, right.
And that gave me a little bit of a hope, like, okay, maybe I'm onto something. But I've never been the kind of player who just picks up a game and I'm like the shit right away. I really have to dedicate my time and energy and focus, and I just can't pick up anything and be good. So if you see me play like a League of Legends game, I'm trash.
Right.
I need to learn and practice, and that's why I hate playing a new game in front of people, because I know I'll be really bad, and they'll be like, but aren't you a pro gamer, or weren't you like the best in the world in gaming? And I'm like, yeah, just like a hockey player can be shit at fucking throwing the javelin.
Sure. One thing that's interesting is, from my memory, because you had so much success at the ESWC women's tournaments, I just remember you winning them all or being in the final. But when I actually looked it up, the first tournament you went to, the first actual ESWC, was basically like the first famous women's tournament that was international. And actually, at this time, it was actually quite rare that North Americans could even go to European tournaments. That was almost kind of like you had to just go to CPLs in America and Dallas. So, one, what was it like to actually go to Paris? And two, I saw you actually didn't do that well in this first one. You got sort of wrecked a bit.
Yeah, I finished 5th, I think. I was in the group from, I don't know if you remember this Swedish team called Les Sols.
Yes.
It was like both like a marketing team, but also they were decent. So I was in their group, and so it was a very interesting experience. Sure. But it was at the Louvre in 2005. Do you remember that tournament?
Sure.
Like completely nuts. It was next to the Jacome. Anyway, it was completely crazy. Back then, Duncan, we had to be invited, and you had to pay your own way there.
Oh wow, right.
And so you had to.
And I bet it wasn't cheap back then. Flights used to cost quite a lot from North America, right?
It was so expensive, and it wasn't something you could buy online. You had to go somewhere and buy the real physical tickets. You know, it was a nightmare. And to be invited there, you had to prove that you were one of the best team in the world. But like today, I don't know, we barely can make an 8-team tournament and maybe like a 12-team tournament on the women's circuit. But back then there was like,
oh, it was loads, wasn't it? Yeah.
60 teams who wanted to attend. And so we had to prove that Team Canada, we were part of that 24 teams to be invited. So we had to pay our way to multiple tournaments across the world, like Spain, Toronto, New York, and just show that, hey, we want to be invited to the World Cup. So that year it cost us a lot of money. Right. A lot of my savings went into that. And then we found Check 6 Gaming. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
That team? So they were like, I don't know. It seems like a fucking shady org. It's never been like a real org in my mind. Every time they came back, it looked like
they did come back a lot of times, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah. But that time was like their first origin.
Right.
And it felt like this one guy was just like pouring all the money from his bank account. I don't know. His name was Rich. Really great guy. On the surface, allowed us to go to Paris for Check 6. We had our first sponsorship back then, Steel Series. And we attended the Louvre, and it was kind of crazy. We were sleeping 6 in the same bed.
By the way, since you brought it up there, that's also another thing I'd like to actually ask you about the early women's scene, which is some of the people who even made teams, in fact, even some of the famous ones, like you say, weren't necessarily actually the best players. It was more like people thought cynically, like, in fact, you know what gaming was like back then. It was like sex sells and all that. So actually there were teams that were made that weren't even trying to like be the best, or they didn't pick the best, but they picked people who were very good looking, or people who were willing to do like the equivalent of like a men's magazine shoot with mice and headsets. Like, you weren't really in these teams. You were in the teams that were always hyper competitive, especially when you got to SK and other teams. What did you think about that aspect like then? Do you think some people saw women's CS like cynically, or didn't see it as a competition or something? What would you say?
I think we were not, as a society, but also in gaming, we were not educated to understand the differences. And I was part of it. Like, I thought, yeah, they are a marketing tool or whatever, right? At the time, they used their image, and I was like upset about it.
Oh, right.
But not necessarily upset, but I thought, kind of thing.
Okay.
But I think now I understand, especially back then, any publicity was good publicity to create that spark. And now even more, I think like for me, there's no such thing as a fake gamer girl or a TD gamer or whatever. Like, I think just like in movies or just like in any form of art, if you want to use your body and if you feel comfortable and you respect yourself along the way, let's fucking go.
Right.
It's not something that I personally can do or want to do. Just because I'm obsessed with performance and success and all the kind of stuff over anything else. But I've learned to respect, and not only respect it, but embrace it and be happy for these people. So back then, they're really like the Lissol was doing an international tour, because they were like the pretty Swedish girls. But now I'm like, fuck yeah, if that could have helped a couple women play the game, let's go.
One of the cool things is you actually, if people don't know, were in the SK team very early on, and that became a team which is, especially over the years, eventually became the best team. So I saw that when you went back to next year and you were in this team, this is where you already met like two of your long-term teammates. So I want to talk about now, which is, one is obviously Potter, who people obviously know because she's like a Valorant champion coach, etc., and did all the stuff in CS later. But actually one that is, I think, criminally forgotten is Ali, who, if people don't know, was, whenever I asked people recently about that thing I messaged you about, like who were the best women's players, the people who back then remember her, mate, and she was someone I know also played like a bunch, I think, of the West Coast lands with mixed teams with men and stuff. Like these were big name players, right? But they came big name on playing with you. So who were they? Give me some sense of what they were like as people and players. Yeah.
So Ali is the reason I competed internationally.
Oh, okay.
For me, Ali is my Messi in football, like in soccer, right? And so when I made Team Canada, I saw Ali the year before compete and for a play for Team USA and be the leader that brought them to, I think they also didn't win that year. It was the year they were followed by was it the MTV year? No, that was the year before MTV. It was in Poitiers, whatever. I'm getting lost in the details, but it was a big event, and I couldn't believe that an American girl close to me could make it. And I was like, okay, she represents the US, so I'll do the Canada one.
Right.
And I remember, especially a couple of months before the World Cup, she wanted to pick me up, or I have a vague memory of her wanting me to pick me up and play for Team USA and ditch Team Canada. And I said, no, I got to follow like my morals, finish this project. And then right after the World Cup, where we were talking about in Paris earlier, I swapped and I went to play with her team that just won the World Cup. But for me, Ali was like, she was just this fearless leader who just only cared about winning and doing it with fun and you know, discipline and all that kind of stuff. So me and Potter, we sacrificed our young adult life to gaming. Like, there was no money. We were paying to attend tournaments. We were paying to boot camp. We would do it in each other's homes. We did it once in Alice's homes, once in Potter's homes, one in my home. And, you know, I remember actually the SK year. So we were picked up by SK in 2026, the year that you and I met. We were the day before we had to leave for the event. We still didn't have our plane tickets from SK. And we had to go to a warehouse next to the airport right before a flight to pick up the physical tickets. And we were not sure we were getting scammed. Right. Scared not at the time. Sure. And, you know, we were not officially signed yet. It was just like a big mess. But Ali, for me, is almost synonym of CS women. I think Anuk in the early years in Europe was also like a pretty dominant woman figure, but I felt closer to Ali, obviously, because Ali was part of my continent. But she competed in men's team at high level, whether it's online in the leagues, whether it's online. Like, she finished third at a CPL with her whole team back then called Rivals. Like, for me, there's not a lot of women that compare to what she did, and all of it in the background. That's the thing about Alice and also Potter. Like, for the first 10 years of their career, they didn't do any social media. We didn't have social media. They didn't do any interview. They hated all that kind of stuff. They just wanted to compete. I was like an oddball back then, wanting to like show our face in the newspaper to get partners, and like I was the one kind of pushing for us to get the money, but they hated it. Like, every time we won a World Cup, they just wanted to go and get drunk. And I was like, we gotta do the interviews. We gotta show up for our partners. And now it seems normal and logical and everybody's doing it. But you know, back in 2007, when pretty much we had no salary, we paid to be there. They didn't really care. But for Alice and Potter, it was always a very intense relationship when we were playing together. Some of you might know also Christine. She's very intense and passionate. I'm the same. Alice is the same. And it was kind of like, we have to stick together to win tournaments, but we know that together sometimes it's a little bit toxic. And so for the longest time, I think I was cut from Alice and Potter from teams like 10 times, and I joined again 10 times over. Because, you know, in the end, we knew we were the best players in the world, but sometimes we didn't have any coaches. We didn't know how to handle like conflicts and stuff. We were just like hammering and getting like, you know, it was a fucking dynamite. But looking back, those were the best years of my life by far. And I just wish we had someone to help us and handle the emotion a little bit better, because instead of being like I think it was a 15-year dynasty, I think we would still be competing to this day. You know, like you see these Juliano and these zAAz, and I'm like,
they played a long time.
We can still do it.
By the way, along those lines, one thing you're saying there is actually a famous thing in the men's game too, which is actually because media wasn't a big thing and a lot of players were quite shy, a lot of even the pro teams just had one player, usually the captain, who did the interviews, like famously in Fnatic. It would be Khan. You'd never see Forrest in an interview. It would be Khan, and or maybe like DSN might do one every now and then. Right? In your case, as you say, it seems like you embraced that role fairly early on. Like, I'm going to be the person who does the media, because you are right. Players back then thought, I just frag, I don't need to do media. But like, I think people now understand in all sports, media is huge. It's like what keeps people engaged in the game. It's how people know who you are. Obviously, it matters for sponsors. Did you have a sense of this early on?
Yeah, I thought, like, since social media didn't exist, I'm like, how else are we going to make the money to to, for exposure and stuff, we need to do these media. And what I really thought was, now that we got the money, we got to show that the people that invested in us, like they deserved. So I wanted to do, I did like, I don't know how many front page newspaper in Canada. And like I did pretty much every single newscast that I could every time. And still to this day, I do about like 100 appearances a year on like media, TV show. And there's a reason why I was invited on a show like Big Brother Celebrity over there, right? It's because I worked to make sure that not only I could make a living out of it, but my team as well. Like for 15 years, it was all about the team I was in. And to be fair, it's still a little bit about the team I'm in, whether it's Red with CLG and FlyQuest. I don't like doing social media. I freaking hate it. Can I swear on your?
Yeah, of course. I do it all the time. Don't worry.
I fucking hate social media. It's the worst shit ever, but I have to do it. And so that's why sometimes I don't post for 3 fucking weeks, because I'm like, I hate it, and it's just how it is. Like when I came out of Big Brother in the last couple of weeks, I just stopped posting for 3 weeks, and now I realize, fuck, I gotta start posting again, and you know, I just fucking hate it. But it's important in my sphere to help the people around me more than myself.
Right. Obviously, if you're following the story of the ESWCs, the next one's the best one, right? 2007 is where you go and you win this thing this time. This time the team actually is the best. So had something changed? Was it your time?
07, I think I played really well that tournament too. 07 was, I think it was when I feel the gaming became a little bit bigger, or CS became a little bit bigger, because when we won, I really feel that SK Gaming, especially SK Ladies, became like the freaking best team in the world when it comes to everything that has to do with women in gaming. And for those who don't remember, there was a website called, it still exists. The SK Gaming website was pretty much the Facebook of gaming.
Yeah.
And so everyone had a gaming page on there with all their accomplishments, and there were people who would post pictures. It was pretty much like before social media, or little social media. Yeah. And so being the best team in the world on SK with my profile page there, it was like everything was coming to us. Like we didn't have to do much. It was great. I fucking loved it. And I remember that's the year I decided to move to Paris for school. And, I would go to these local lands in France. And so I had to quit SK for a year because I couldn't practice with them. And so I would put a CRT in a train in France and go to these local lands with random guys, because I was like, I need to get my name out there. So I kind of reproduced what I was doing in Quebec. And then people in the lands were like, oh, this is SK Gaming, Miss Harvey. What the fuck is she doing here? You know? And I just like started making a name for myself there until the French team picked me up. So
even though I actually knew obviously a lot of the European teams that were good in this game, I was shocked when I looked this up. You played a Chinese team in the final. I wasn't even aware there was like a Chinese female team.
Yeah. In 07, it was a Chinese team called E-Honor, I think.
Yeah.
And back then, China was so feared in Counter-Strike women.
Oh, okay.
They came in and they were just fierce. Every time the Chinese team came during these like 2 or 3 years, I think it started in 06, they were decent. And then 07, 08, there's 2 World Cups. And then, these like 3 gaps of years, they're so dominant. Everybody feared them because they didn't know how they were playing. A little bit like, if people watch Valorant a bit, like these Asian teams, they like go full on aggro.
Oh, sure.
And yeah, it was a little bit like that. Right. And I feel that we wrecked them, if I'm not mistaken. We had a really good tournament. I think we had like 1 difficult match, and then everything else we wrecked everyone. And that, for me, the way that I saw American Counter-Strike and Canadian Counter-Strike, Dan, and still a little bit now, but Dan, is that what I said at the beginning was really true. We only played men versus men. We played in men leagues. And I think it took a longer time in Europe for the community to kind of respect women the same way.
Did the European women just play against each other and not play in the leagues? What was the situation in that?
A little bit against each other, but even when they played men, they're so disrespected, and they played way lower team than they were at because they couldn't find good practice. And they were just like a lot more systemic misogyny that when I moved, I was kind of shocked. And then people like, when you heard things like, oh, you play like a man and stuff, that I never heard that in America.
Oh, right.
I only heard that in Europe, right? I remember playing with Cold Sarah. That was a little bit later, but I remember him saying like, you play like a man. And for me, I'm like, no, I play like myself. I play like, fucking everybody needs to play Counter-Strike. And in Europe, I felt it was a little bit difficult for women's team to like really burst. And I think that's why we were so dominant for so long. And because we were playing with the top of the top in NA, and we just like competed at a very high level, we were just ahead from our practice and the quality of our practice for a long time. Because I think what the Imperial Female is doing right now is really hard. Staying at the top for that long without getting challenged is way harder than just winning a tournament. You follow sports a lot. Dynasties are way harder to create than just a winning team, right? It's winning over and over when everybody knows how you play, and so I'm really proud of that time. Like that started in 2007 because we barely lost. We lost like maybe like a couple of times here and there, but for almost 10 years, we were really the team to beat.
Along these lines, like when there's an appropriate moment, I'll just do a segue like this. Another thing I wanted to ask you about actually does touch on what a lot of people talk about now with the women's game, where they're playing in some of the male tournaments, which is I have to remind people, like, maybe some people, this is a cool story. Like, it had happened before. People almost tried to make it sound like women have never played men before. I was like, that was happening 20 years ago. So actually, one thing I want to ask you about is this. One thing that I remember you having a conversation with me about many years ago, probably over 10 years ago now, that actually changed my perspective on women's Counter-Strike especially, was back then, the famous thing that annoyed men in the scene was they all thought, oh, wait, the women think that they're as good as the men, and that's why they should be in like the tournament and they should play against them. But you actually told me, oh, none of us say that. Like, we don't say we're better than like the best male team or that we'd beat them in a match. What we want is like, we want our own tournament so we have somewhere to play and people can actually start to play and become pro, etc., as opposed to everyone just playing like the first round of a qualifier and losing, where you wouldn't have a career from that. And then the other thing was, you said, but also we do try to still enter all the tournaments we can that have men, though, so we can compete against the highest level we can and like level our game up, right? So I know, for example, it's not that you wanted one or the other. You didn't want a totally segregated scene only, but you wanted that so that it could exist so women could compete against each other. A bit like tennis. You want to see who the best women's tennis players are. But you also, actually, I know a big thing for you was to play as many matches and play qualifiers and stuff and go to lands against men so you can level your own game up, right? That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think being exposed to better player makes you better, right? One thing that you tell any aspiring pro player is like, play with better players.
Sure.
Like, watch better player, compete in circumstances that you put yourself out of your comfort zone. And so for me, it has always been important that we play in every single of these qualifiers, the major qualifiers, the big tournaments. And unfortunately, that's not what's being showcased, right? There's not an HLTV post about FlyQuest Red played in the major qualifier for Austin, got shit on. Like, that's not necessarily a thing. But when we did win these matches sometimes, I remember we made top 8 for a qualifier for a land in NA at one point. We reached a close qualifier, so we were top 8 NA teams with I think it was with CLG Red, and that's when we lost to Renegade, who I think ended up winning the whole thing.
Oh, right.
And they beat us 16-0 or something, and then Benito won 0-16.
It's that famous clip where they were like the highlights and there was none, right? Right, I remember.
So like everybody talked about how shit we were, but think about it. We finally, for the first time in, I don't even know if it's been done since, we made it out of an open qualifier, 124 teams, to the top 8 to compete versus the best in America, which back then was like the Brazilian, the Australians, like it wasn't just NA. And I was so proud of it, but everything that came out was just like, yeah, Benita went 0-32 or something. And then, you know, but, and so we don't talk about when women do great in just like, or really close, and that's okay. I don't really care for it, but it's happening. And the problem for me is like when we do where we do make it close and whatnot, but we get shit on. So I'm happy for Imperials because they actually are pulling out great numbers, and the discussion is no longer about, you know, they can't really compete. It's like, when are they going to get their first game in these events? Although we can talk about the Valve format another time, which I think is a bit messed up. But but yeah, I'm happy for them.
No, but I let me just hit that last point though, because I actually feel like that's a part that people are missing. Is I don't know what you think about it, but I actually do think that is one thing that people also don't know. Some people do think that, do women only play in their own circuit? Do they only ever play against other women? I know actually, look, obviously you can only speak for yourself, but you do think it is important that they don't totally be segregated, right? They don't just only live in a pond over here and never exist in the CS ocean, as it were, right?
Yeah, I see this. For me, women tournaments are incubators. That's it. Right? They are a way for a team or a player to start learning in a safe space. They are not going to get criticized because of their gender. They're not going to get told they suck because there's women. They're going to get told they suck because they suck, not for the wrong reason, right? And that's super important, because when you compete or when you play a game, and every day, and I mean every day, Duncan, you get harassed for your gender in the game when you talk. It's just like, you ask yourself, what the fuck am I doing this? And this goes back to what I said about Alison Potter and myself being the most stubborn women that I've ever met. It's like, it was bigger than us to a certain point. It was just like, couldn't help but stay in that toxic environment to compete and be the best and whatever. And so having these incubators is really great for everyone to just start. And also it gives a platform for teams to have sponsors, to win money. Like, it creates this little ecosystem. I see it the same way as, if there's a Canadian Olympic qualification, or if there is a collegiate event in the US called, they have the NCAA in sports.
It's a good analogy.
Like, you don't see the NBA player being like, this is so fucking messed up. I can't play in the NCAA finals. Yeah, you're not in fucking college, guys. Like, it's the same for me, the women thing. Like, you're not a fucking woman, and that's okay. Like, let them be. They're not stealing anything from you. And on top of it, I see a lot of women being upset about those. And what I think is, like, it's okay that you don't want to play in them too. Like, they're clearly not for you.
Right.
So go compete with the circuit that already exists and just kind of leave us alone while we do our own thing. We get better, and then potentially we will bridge that gap, which is finally kind of happening.
Yes. No, by the way, on that point, I'd even agree, which is one thing that is funny is, because this is such a divisive issue, if you notice, I'm trying to see everyone's perspective. I actually do think there are sometimes women, and funnily enough, the men who want to trash the female scene embrace them for this reason, where their whole shtick is like, I don't ever play in the women's tournaments. Like, that is crap. We should only play against men, and we should prove that we're the best or whatever. But actually, I agree with you. I actually think you can obviously have both. There's no reason we have to pick one or the other. And as you say, for certain people, one's going to make sense and one isn't. Maybe if someone is some person, like you say, a really fiery individual who actually wants to be a pioneer, maybe they want to play with the men only. But maybe someone actually doesn't want all the spotlight, and maybe they want to be good within the women's circuit. It's actually good to have both and have the options, obviously, the ideal scenario, right?
I think so. And I mean, there is one utopia where they don't exist anymore because everybody is a melting pot and everything is great. But, just the same reason why we have Asian qualifier in the major. Yeah, true. We need these major we need these little qualifiers for a different part of the world, or else it would be like only freaking Europeans winning everything, right? Yeah. And so I feel that we're really not there yet, not even close. I wish I could say that things changed since I started, but actually I don't think they did. I think they regressed a little bit. Outside of the salaries from some of the players, like on FlyQuest Red or Imperials, who can do that for a living, which was not possible when I was young. There's just almost no more women's team in the world competing, or women competing overall. So hopefully we see more of the fluorescent in Valorant. And back in the days, there's Scarlet. I think she still competes, but Scarlet in StarCraft, because those are really important.
One thing is, another teammate that joined in the year that you guys won was obviously Jane. And if people don't know, she maybe doesn't have a famous name. If people don't know, she's married to Moses. Like, I'm pretty sure they're pretty public about that. They have family, etc. Right? She's someone who also was in this gang at this point in time for many, many years. I mean, she was playing right through to CSGO.
Yeah, so Jane was on my Canadian team, even though she was not Canadian. So I don't remember where I discovered her. She's this little shy Asian. And I picked her up on a Canadian team. And I think 6 months later that I joined Girls Got Game, who became SK Ladies, I was able to transfer her over with us. And she became like BFF with Potter and Alice and all that kind of stuff. Jane is a really bubbly, giggly kind of player. She was dominant for so long. We tried to make her do a comeback in CSGO at some point. She was like taking it semi-seriously, playing a lot. It didn't work out, but she was also part of that dynasty for at least 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, before she became a scientist, which is so random because I didn't know that was a job. I didn't know you could actually be titled I'm a scientist.
Right.
And so she was a scientist for a couple of years and then came back in gaming, and now she's a programmer and that kind of stuff. And she's married to Moses, and she's great. She's one of the best people to have around.
Well, as you said, it wasn't like you only stayed in this team. For some reason, you were like having this battle with them and going out. And so one of the cool things is the next year, you were on the French team and you played them in the final. Like, what? Yeah. What happened there?
Yeah, I was on the French team, who, by the way, I think hated the fuck out of me.
Oh, wow. Why?
Yeah, I don't know. I think, okay, so hear me out. I was obviously one of the best players in the world. And so it feels like they could not afford to have me because I lived in France and I was really good. So they just picked me up almost by default. But I don't think they liked me very much because I'm an opinionated person and, all that kind of stuff. But I remember the boot camp before the world final, which was in San Jose that year, which is so bizarre because every year it was in France. Yeah. But that one year that I'm living in France, it's in freaking the US. So we were boot camping in Marseille in the south of France. And I remember the whole team made food and they didn't make me food.
Okay.
I know this is silly, right? Again, but they just made food and I'm like, oh, we're in boot camp in the house, and I'm just like, oh, like you made food, that's great. And then they're like, yeah, but we didn't make you some. And I was just like, okay. So this was the kind of relationship I was having with the French team. I don't know. I don't think they didn't like me at all. But I think I played really well. I had a phenomenal semifinal versus the Chinese team, actually, which had beaten the American teams, SK in the groups, and we destroyed them. I remember Potter was telling me we thought you were going to destroy us in the final, and then right before the final, I remember throwing up. It was the first time I threw up before a tournament. Like 5 minutes before the final, I went to the bathroom. Just like I was alone on stage, no one was talking to me. My teammates were not there, and I was just like, "This is really not nice." And
sounds pretty hardcore. Fucking hell, I didn't know it was going this crazy. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really, honestly, I've never really confronted them because I don't care that much about it. But I remember I was just like, what the fuck is happening? And we played the games. We were never really connected in the game. It's just like, it was really a bad final and they won. And I remember that was versus Jane, Alice, and Potter, and also Liddy, and I forgot their fifth. Oh, I think it was Jaso. But they came to me and they were like sad that I lost, but happy they won. It was like a weird feeling for them. I was really happy for them, but I felt like shit because I felt like I didn't never really competed. And fun fact, I don't think I told that to everyone, but I partied all night with them. Almost missed my flight because my roommate didn't wake me up, which was one of the players on the team, obviously, to go back to Paris on the same flight as them, which is so fucking surreal.
Sure.
I just can't believe you would just leave, take a cab, and not wake up here. I don't know, man. The whole thing was so weird. But I've seen some since, and it feels like they don't remember that. All that kind of stuff,
they deleted it all, right?
Nice to me.
Right.
And yeah, they did delete it. So,
well, on this team, though, there was one woman where, again, when I was doing this poll that I've done behind the scene, this piece of content will come out at some point in time, where I asked a bunch of people from different eras, like, who were the sort of five players you'd pick? One of the people on this team was one that someone said. They said MiTsu, this player that was on this team. Yeah. She was in many, many years. She competed in top women. I think she also played in the CSGO. Who was this person?
So MiTsu was on my team. She was really good. Actually, she was probably one of the best. And the reason why I stayed, I wanted to join that team because back then I made my own little French team too, but I felt like I couldn't beat someone like MiTsu. I just wanted to join her. And I think her and I are cool now. We talked about it quite a lot. And I remember beating her the next year on SK, and she came to me and she apologized and she was chill and very sweet.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I think her and I are chill. But she was a pretty big French player. But the French legacy in women in 1.6 was huge. They won in 06 and they've always been in the top 4 for as long as I can remember. And when it transitioned to CSGO, there was also a little bit of a moment where there was 1 or 2 French team. Actually, Ocelot's ex-wife was on that French team too.
Right.
And like they've always been around, but it kind of died in the recent years because all the French players joined international teams. But yeah, so MiTsu is one of the greats. I think she won the World Cup in 06. And she was always one of the best, if not the best player coming out of France during that era.
Another person who obviously, as the years went on, came and joined SK Ladies was bENTIA. You just referenced her earlier. Now, it's funny because at the time, she was like the baby of the team, I remember. But actually, the funny thing is, she actually only just retired not that long ago. And I even told her, like, what's insane is you actually had like your own Hall of Fame career, like, because she had all that success in Valorant as well and CSGO. So who was young bENTIA when you first met her? Was she different?
Okay. So I met bENTIA when she was 11 years old.
Fucking hell, okay.
Yes. So she started Counter-Strike at 9 because of her brother, I think. And then I met her when she was 11 in servers. We had this thing called 10 Women, which is we had like an MRC server channel where we would have a bunch of women in there and we would create these 10 women and have captains and stuff.
It's basically like a captain's draft pickup, right? It's like two of you pick teams.
Yes.
Like, I'll pick you, you pick you. It's like the playground, right?
Yes, and it was back in 04,
right.
03, 04.
Right.
So it was really primitive, but you needed someone that had a server, which was already like,
Yeah.
And you needed to find 10 women live online at the same time to compete on an MRC platform. So it was quite a challenge, but bENTIA got added there. I think it's because she was West Coast and she was hanging out sometimes at the local lands where Alice was and something.
Right.
But I don't remember exactly what happened, but she was in these 10 men. And I'm a pretty silly and bubbly person. And so I was like trolling around and bENTIA at 11, all I could hear was hee 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 hee, and she was just like laughing. And that's all. She would just be this little girl laughing. And bENTIA was so good. Maybe not at 11, but I would say at 13, 14, she was so good, better than anybody else in the scene. But she was 13 and 14, so we couldn't pick her up because all the tournament's minimum age was 16.
Yeah.
And so she was a dunk back then. She pretty much was destroying everybody. No one could play with her, so she couldn't officially play on a women roster to compete internationally. So she would play with guys in CPL and Cal, which was like the ESEA league at the time. And as soon as she reached, I think 15 or 16, she was signed on SK.
Right.
So bENTIA joined. I'm not like, I'm going to say something that's a bit illegal for Americans, but for Canadian, we don't care. But I remember I got her first drink in Mexico.
Oh, right.
She was 16 and I took care of her the whole night. She had like a little bit of tequila. Nonetheless, I've been around bENTIA's life and bENTIA has been around my life up until actually this year. I went to play poker with her because she's now into poker and trying to like figure out what to do with that. So she had a stream poker event in LA a couple months ago and I went and I played in it. So we're really good friends still, and she's one of the most inspirational person. Like you said, she's still very young and she's still trying to figure out what she's going to do with her life now. She's no longer in Valorant. She was one of the first players to swap to Valorant. Back when it came out, professional player, women and guys included, and she also won titles over there. And she's just like,
the crazy thing to see was when she's the veteran though, like she was the older person in those teams as opposed to the baby. Yeah,
that is really wild to see. But she was still young. She was late 20s, early 30s. Okay, but one thing about bENTIA one thing that is great to have her on a team is, she, like me, Potter Alice, she has her own little personality, but when it's live and when in the end you got to win this map and nothing else matter, bENTIA never chokes.
Right.
So she will always pull up numbers, and she'll always, someone yesterday on my Valorant team, women Valorant team, said play like bENTIA, big balls bENTIA.
Right.
And that's kind of how I describe her. She just will peek, will swing, and it's not always the cleanest and it's not always the best, but her nerves are steals, and that's what you need. And it's not necessarily because she's the best player in the world, but she was always show up and on LAN. That's kind of what matters.
One tournament, I definitely remember this one, was they actually, if people know the story of when Na'Vi, the Ukrainian team, came along, one of the reasons Na'Vi had funding was this millionaire guy from Kazakhstan called Arbalet made all these tournaments. And actually, he made a women's tournament. It was in Kiev in Ukraine. And you guys went there with this lineup of players we're talking about and won the tournament. So that was actually an era where, until they did the ESL Impact, for me, that was like the glory days of women's CS, because it wasn't just ESWC then. You had other lands as well, and suddenly you could actually win real money. By the way, this could be tens of thousands, 20. There was real money at the time as well. So what was it like to actually go there? It must have been crazy to go to Ukraine for the first time.
That was really crazy. I've never been to Russia still to this day, but to me, I guess that was the closest of going to Russia. It felt like Russia everywhere.
Right.
The city. It was very interesting, but I think it was mostly interesting is in this LAN tournament that we had, the Arbalet Cup, there was no spectators. It was really just the women competing.
Right.
With pretty good production value. But we were treated, so there was also regular Arbalet Cups, not just for women's. And so it was exactly the same quality.
Right.
And it was one of the first tournament who just treated us the same, and not you're just a psychic tournament, we're going to put you in the basement or behind the curtains, which actually happens almost still to this day. Okay. But Arbalet, it was the same thing. The trophies the same size. Everything was the same. We couldn't believe it. They flew us there. They paid for a trip. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this. The first Arbalet Cup was canceled because of the volcano. Erupted in Iceland the day we were all flying across the world to Arbalet. The volcano erupted, which meant that half of our team got stuck at a different place, and JSO got stuck in Germany for 2 weeks because flights were not there. Arbalet Cup had a weird kind of weird tournament with the people who showed up. Then they bought flights again to everyone. And made another event, which mind-blowing. They were just the greatest. And they paid us cash. Cash.
Yeah.
We
give you it physically. Yeah.
It was $15,000, and they just gave us the $15,000. They were just what the hell is going on? And we came back through the plane with our $15,000 cash. It was wild. It was one of the hardest final I've ever had. I think it was versus zAAz and Juliano.
Yeah. zAAZ was in the team.
And
but she was 19 at the time, though.
Yeah. And I remember bENTIA and I had thick finals. That's all I can remember. Right. That's all I can really remember. But and I had played so well that event, and I remember we didn't have a coach. I've never pretty much had a coach my whole life, which is a shame. So it was SK Gaming's owner and CEO. I don't know if he's still CEO. It was Alex.
Yeah.
He was behind us, and he was all the pictures is just Alex going
right.
He's just freaking out behind us because he couldn't do it behind the guys' team from SK because they had a coach.
Oh,
so
right.
He would come and just kind of coach us at these events. He didn't say much. He was just being Jason Lake, bring me the pistols.
Another thing around this era was, even though eventually you had to leave SK and you made the UBINITED team, so it was basically the same exact squad, if people don't know. It's the same people all stayed together. Right, I wanted to actually ask about that. I will say, if people look at the time period, this is actually when CS 1.6 was towards the end. Actually, some big orgs maybe weren't involved as much. How did the UBINITED one come along? Wasn't this when you actually worked at Ubisoft or something weird like that? Was it around the same time?
Yeah, so I was working at Ubisoft as a game designer in Montreal on, at the time, I think it was on the Far Cry franchise.
All right.
And the thing that happened with UBINITED, and I'm gonna try not to shade Alex because he took care of us for a long time.
Sure.
But I felt that as a woman, I wasn't treated with the same amount of respect as our coworkers.
Okay.
I remember we worked booths at events, and we later learned that we were making a lot of money that weekend for our presence, but we didn't get a single dollar from it, you know. So there was a lot of little moments where we were just like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? And I took on the challenge, like straight up with Christine, to create our own org and just like go freelance and launch UBINITED. So that was at the end of 2010. So we won 2010, the World Cup at Disneyland Paris with SK Gaming. And then after that, we launched UBINITED. And so really grateful for all these years on SK. They gave me some of my best memories in the world, but we felt that it was about time that we kind of swapped. And we wanted to go to the World Cup. We didn't have any money because you had to pay your way there. And so Ubisoft just came, and I made a deal with them, kind of like going to the booth in France and promoting and calling our team UBINITED, and just like kind of being like before influencers were a thing, kind of being influencers for Ubisoft, even though it was a Counter-Strike game, even though it was a Valve game, it was like really weird. And I just launched Shoot Mania.
Oh yeah, that was huge, obviously in France, yeah.
Yeah, and so we kind of all together came to the conclusion that we could promote Shoot Mania at Paris Games Week. And both the Montreal office and the Paris office gave us 15 grand to attend the World Cup. And that's how UBINITED was created. They provided us with rooms to make the boot camps in Montreal. They gave us computers to make the boot camps. So pretty much, Potter and I ran our own org. And then, well, I would say at the beginning it was me, and then something wild happened in the scandals of Intel misogynistic situation. They came out with a public statement that they wanted to invest $300 million in diversity in the company. Okay. And part of it, we got a call from Intel, Extreme Master, and they were like, Intel is looking to sponsor one women team, and they want it to be UBINITED. Are you interested? And we were just like, what the fuck? And so we took that deal right away. And that allowed us, that deal was insane. Like, even to this day, with 2025 money, it was insane. Oh, wow. Right. And we were able to attend like 5 to 10 events a year. We had per diem, like we almost had a little bit of a salary. It was, and that was, we signed for 3 years. So that was fucking phenomenal. And then we were able to sign partners. Like, I think we had Steel Series, and we had a bunch of partners like that. But we had to be a charity in the US, a charitable like company. So Christina had to start the company in the US because she was American. And I was handling everything else from Canada. And for 4 years, we were UBINITED, and Ubisoft continued supporting us for the World Cup, and was featuring us to. It was so bizarre. Like, these years were so bizarre, and it was when League of Legends organization started investing in CS. So Cloud9 picked up a team, CLG picked up a team, Liquid picked up a team. And still to this day, Liquid still has the same kind of ambition of keeping it NA a bit. Right. And so we were getting poked left and right to like join an org. I mean, we came with the money. They didn't have to pay for anything. Oh, right. I see. Right. So it was also like, win-win for everyone. And I just didn't want anything to do with it. I'm like, I don't want to make the same mistakes as what we did before. But then, you know, you're gonna get there some point in your in your timeline, but then at some point, I still gave it.
Yeah. No, but let me rewind a second. That's one thing that I actually think is maybe modern day players won't even appreciate this or know what the pioneers went through. Like, in my own career, I had many years where I'd made like minimum wage, basically, or, you know, you just had to like live with your parents for a year or two or share a really bad apartment and just think, and at the time, you don't even, like in this scenario, you don't even think you're ever going to make a salary or that. It's just cool to be there and cool to do. So one thing I would ask is this, when you've actually hung on for all these years and you've kept going and you paid for yourself and you've moved to different countries to join teams and stuff, it must be really validating when suddenly like the opportunity comes to have like salary and actually have people fund your dream. So that's got to be really cool, right?
It's undescribable because now kids can have the hope to become a professional player.
Yeah.
Right? When we were young, you and I, it was not a thing. The biggest thing we could do was win the World Cup.
Yes.
There was like a couple players around the world who were paid. You know, there was the Fatality of the world who was starting to make waves, and you know, and there was some Counter-Strike players who were like, if you were top 5, you were probably a little bit salaried and whatnot. But like, other than that, it was pure passion, and so we had like full-time jobs in gaming, but we made zero out of it. It was just passion, and so to all of a sudden have some support, it felt like we were the fucking shit. Like, it felt like we are the highest level that it can be in gaming in the world. And it's not something that people can necessarily understand now, because even pro players, influencers are bigger than them. Like, you have like Mr. Beast of the world and stuff who are like always gonna be richer and bigger than, you know, the best professional players, right? It felt like a dream, like more than a dream. It consumed my life. It became everything that I was about. And, you know, I was professional gaming. There's nothing else in my life for almost 20 years, I would say now. But, and just, that was the only thing I cared about. I was so into winning and being the best. And now I had an opportunity to do it with backing and being able to not have a lot of debts. And before we got Intel, we knew Intel was going to come, but we didn't know when. And so I took on a lot of loans and credit card debts to pay for everything. I think I paid for half a year before we got the Intel money. And so that was also like a really, like, I could have gotten fucked, but thankfully I didn't. But, you know, I was down a lot of money, and I didn't tell the players. So, which is also very weird, because I was playing on the team, managing the team, and I didn't tell the team I was down in money. Only Potter and I knew that I was like 50 grand down, 60 grand down, just to like support the team and make sure that they could pretty much do what I'm doing right now. Make sure that everybody else could compete and be at their best and not worry about anything else while, you know, I was the one not sleeping at night.
Sure. I mean, even that's like a thing worth asking about, though, because obviously there's so much money in gaming now. Some people's perception is it's a bit like in sports, like, oh, I'm just making money. Everyone's making crazy money. They're all spoiled, etc. In this scenario, like, some people might think that story's crazy. Like, you get in debt, as you say. What if it was like, oh, sorry, it's another 6 months? Like, it might have gotten really hairy, but it was obviously your dream, right? It was important to you.
Yeah, it was bigger than anything. And I think one thing that we haven't talked about is I couldn't have done that without the support of my parents, because when I was
Did they think you were crazy when you were going in debt?
Yeah. I didn't tell them everything.
All right, okay.
But when I was in high school, and so the thing is that I have a master, a bachelor, a master, like all that kind of stuff, right? And I worked full-time before going full-time pro gaming. I only went full-time pro gaming in 2015. So before that, I had like a regular life, right? And so my parents, I remember when I was studying in architecture for my bachelor, they were, I had to tell them I want to continue my studies in architecture, and I'm not quitting gaming. And so I have to stop working. And thankfully, education in Canada and Quebec is a lot cheaper than in America, because I could have never done it if I was in the States. But and so I pretty much asked them, like, are you able to financially pay for my studies and my food and everything until I'm done with school? And they said yes and supported me along the way. And what I learned later, because when I wrote my book, my dad read my book, and I write the story about how supportive they were. And he was like, that's not what happened. We were freaking out.
Oh,
we were freaking out, but they never told me.
Right.
And so I even wrote a book where I said they were amazing. They supported me right away. But behind the scene, they were fucking like, she's ruining her life, blah, blah, blah. And so the reason why I say still to this day, and I know the story, that's because of my parents, is they never made me feel like I was ruining my life. I was doing like something crazy. They made me feel like I could do it. And if anyone could do it, it would be me. And so that's how I run my life. And that's why when I did the UBINITED stuff, I kind of tried to shield most of the players from that.
You're following their example in a way, right? You didn't know it, but you kind of did the same thing, right? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I still do, to this day, do this at FlyQuest with the Red program. Yeah.
By the way, in the UBINITED team, obviously you won a few ESWCs in this squad as well. The question I have is this. You referenced it already with the Imperial female team, where if people don't know through the different orgs they were in, they were basically like almost unbeaten on land for like 2 years or something. I agree with you.
Yeah.
People don't know. I think there's a concept in sports and esports where if someone hasn't competed, they think it's like you get good and then you're just good and you just stay there. And, you know, if you win the next term. And I always tell people, no, the amazing thing if you know these people is because they've got to the top. Well, first of all, then you have to like remotivate yourself and you have to find another reason. A lot of people win a championship and then they kind of just chill like, I've won. So to keep winning, you have to, first of all, have a very interesting mentality. And then also, obviously, all the other teams are gunning for you. They're all studying your demos and trying to beat you. And they're all super, every time they play you, it's like the final, even if it's a group stage game. So what were the challenges? Because you had a lot, like you say, it was a dynasty. You guys were winning every year. And every year, they were making all the other super teams to try and beat you. And zAAz would be on this team. And then, they were definitely all trying to gun for you, right? So how did he build this dynasty? How did he stay on top?
I think the hardest part is that we never knew because the World Cup is once a year. Imagine one major every year and it's on one weekend and that's it, right? And so we had one shot every year and we didn't know where we were compared to the competition because we were in NA, so we couldn't compare ourselves to Europe. And the format was kind of shit. Like there was BO1s, there was like I remember there was one year we didn't lose a single match in groups and we didn't make it out of the group because it was like we had two ties or something.
Oh,
one tie.
Right.
I think 3 teams had one tie and we didn't make it out of the group and we were like, what the fuck? We didn't lose the fucking game. And I think I remember this was like my best performance of all time on paper and we didn't make it out of group. And so the you had one shot, one chance, and sometimes you fucked it up. And then you had the whole fucking year to be miserable and think about like what you did wrong. I guess it's a little bit closer to the Olympics where it's 4 years for them.
Yeah, true.
So the only thing that we could do was prepare ourselves as much as we can to face any situation that we could when we were in these competitions. So the way that I always said and always felt was we can only control what we can do, which is practice, make sure all of our details on each maps was like fully fleshed out. And it feels like today so dumb to say, but I was the annoying one who would test every single flash that we did and make sure that it actually and today it's like, yeah, of course you're gonna do that. But back then, it was 2 a.m. for me because the thing about America too is we have 3-hour time zones.
Oh yeah.
So someone would end work at 6 p.m. and that would be 9 p.m. for me, and so I would play at like 1, 2 a.m. and I had school the next day. Like shit was crazy, and I would be the annoying one. Like, wait, that flash doesn't pop, or that flash doesn't flash me, doesn't flash that angle, and like we have to practice it over. And like I would take notes for every fucking map. I had these printable maps where you could write and erase.
Oh, right.
And so, because we didn't have tablets, we didn't have laptops, that wasn't a thing. So we would be on the plane and I would just like draw. I would ask my teammates, okay, is this strat? What do you do? And then like they would have to like get quizzed and like, we didn't have notebooks. Like
by the way, you said it, but did they all find it annoying? Because I remember like, dude, it's not even that long ago that a lot of players didn't want to do homework and they wanted to just frag, but they were really pissed off, right?
They hated it.
Right.
They hated it so much. And then sometimes we would go to an event. I'm like, oh, we didn't do train. We didn't do train. Like, and then people were like, we got train. I'm like, no, we don't. We don't. Like, my brain knows that these angles on train are not like your arm could be sticking out. Like, all these kind of stupid things. And so, I was that annoying person. And for me, that was our way of being like, we cannot prepare versus these teams because we don't know. For the last year, we haven't played these teams at this caliber because there's no other freaking tournament.
Yeah.
So the only thing we can do is control what we can. And for me, that was that. Make sure that at least our utility, our timing, our trades, our angles, all of that shit was impeccable. So that when shit hits the fan and strats don't work, we know it's not because, oh, I missed my flash or I missed this. It's like, okay, it's not working versus this setup. Let's swing it and let's swing. Let's do something different. And I fucking loved it.
By the way,
it's so great to be talking about that with
it's
you.
Fun, right?
So cool.
Yeah. Right. One thing I want to ask as well is, around this time, and someone who actually everyone in CSGO will know, is when you played with sapphiRe, and she obviously later became very famous. She actually still works in Valorant now, as far as I know, doing all the observing of the game, etc. But if people don't know, she was actually someone, I remember, I knew her back in the day. She actually came from Source. I think her brother was like a pro, so I think he was on like 3D and CGS or something. She came from Source, and then she was like, actually, she was someone who also went all the lands in her area, and then she got into like the female side. I believe she actually came from the male side into the female side of the mixed teams, etc. Who was sapphiRe back then? Because obviously now everyone sort of knows she's one of the aunties of the scene, but what was she like as a younger person?
Okay, it's 2012. We're still playing Counter-Strike 1.6, but we know it's fuck. That shit is dead.
Sure.
And then 2 months or 3 months before the World Cup, CSGO comes out. And it's a weird mix of Source and 1.6, the feeling of playing. And I forgot what happened exactly, but we were one player short. So we had to transfer. We were the reading champions from 2011. So we had to transfer game, obviously, because we were invited to the World Cup. And for me, it took me a long time to adjust to CSGO. Like I said earlier, I'm not someone that picks up a game and becomes good. So the transition was a bit rough for me. And we needed someone who could play the game and cared about the game. And so we had 1.5 months to get ready for this game, and we picked up sapphiRe because I think she used to play with Potter in Source.
Right.
So she was a connaissance of Potter through a team that she played in Source, because Potter did a sting in Source in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, when the ESWC World Cup died, and we didn't travel anyway, and so sapphiRe was kind of like just the player that we kind of needed for that little 3 months. And that was it. Because she joined, we won the World Cup with her, and then we parted ways with her.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
So we kind of just like stayed close. And then she joined Team Karma, who then had a better performance, I think in 2013 than us. And she was kind of like the leader of that new squad, players that you might recognize now, which was Emily, Rain, and Artstar and stuff that. So sapphiRe joined us for a little bit. I mean, we won a World Cup with her. What is there to say other than I cannot believe we won that event? By the way, if you ask me which event was the hardest to win, I'm gonna say 2012 winning that World Cup with sapphiRe, because for context, the game lasted 5 hours. They had to cancel the main event on stage and do it behind the stage. It was the French team, CSGO French team with NBK and all, and they had to play behind the scene.
Oh wow!
No crowd, because our game was not ending.
Was it just overtimes or something? It just kept going.
Overtimes over overtimes. It was named Game of the Year in 2012.
Right.
All games included. Let me tell you, it was versus zAAz and Juliano. We lost the first map, got shit on, like something like 16-4. I don't know. Then we were losing 12-4.
Oh, I actually remember I think I did a write-up about this because I was on SK at the time, and I believe this was the one where it's like you were supposed to be out of the tournament and you just did the biggest comeback ever or something, right?
It was insane. It was it's still to this day, I think it's one of the biggest comeback of all time. We came back in overtime to win 3 overtime when we were down like 14-1 or some shit.
Okay.
And the third map, we're losing again. I think it was like 13-2. We lose pistol. It's 14-2. And then we come back to win in overtime again. Like it just doesn't make sense. I still don't understand how we won that game. And at that point, I think zAAZ and Juliano, there's pictures of them crying after this event because how do you fuck this up? And at this point, I really thought we are so in their fucking head. Like I can't believe this just happened. Like we were just beating them every time in these crazy circumstances up until like, I think it was a little bit years later where they finally were able to like start to beat us and then beat us. But wow, what a final. I mean, there's not a lot of words to describe what happened. It sounds
like a movie. It sounds sick.
It's like a movie. For me, it's like my movie in my head, and I think I collapsed after the game because I was like too much pressure, and I just like fell on the stage with Potter, and we were just like, what the fuck just happened? Cannot believe we won this. And this is the event I met NBK, which is like one of my great friends for a long time after that.
By the way, since, as you say, this was the early days, actually, of zAAZ and Juliano, who obviously the joke is they still play to this day, they're still really good, and they're still some of the top women players. Who were these? But were they actually like phenoms when you first met them? Were they as good? What were they like?
So zAAZ was always very good, even when she was really young. I think the first time I met her, she was 16, or like really young in 2008. She was part of the Swedish team that were like really cute. I think she was recruited on Les Sol because obviously zAAZ is stunning, and so she was part of that group, the Swedish group, and they kind of like put her on the scene. I think they did really good that year. They finished like either second or third, and after that, she was just around, and she was one of the best player in the world to this day. And she makes me feel like a little bit of a bENTIA, where she has like ice cold veins, just peaks, swings, and just like triple kill everyone. And you know, she has gone and came back so many times, and she's always one of the best, if not the best in the world. Like just the fact that she went to Valorant for 4 years, came back to CS, and is still one of the best, if not the best, along with Anna, is like phenomenal.
As you say, when CSGO came along, it was not that long later on when you had the swap where it became CLG, right? Because as you say, the big League Legends, I mean, they did the same thing the men's side. They made the CLG team with Tarek, and they made the Team Liquid one with Elysian Knight. Although everyone knows the story of those ones. But actually, this was quite a significant story because, as you say, a detail, I remember you telling me about this as well, was part of the reason why this was a good, interesting pickup, because you get the big org on the one hand, so you get like that aspect, but you guys were actually, it was actually you bringing the money, basically. In fact, it was literally you, wasn't it, Steph? Wasn't you the one who had the connection? And it was kind of like, look, this is why I know you're a very fair person. You could have just like kind of played God with the scene, like kicked people and fucking gone crazy. But you actually went out of your way to make sure this team continued on and had like a similar core of people, I notice.
Yeah. So I did not care to sell. And I remember Christine wanted to sell. She just didn't want to deal with the business anymore, which is fair. It's annoying. It's not, and she was just like, let's just sell, let's just settle, let's just compete. And CLG approached us. And again, I didn't want to sell, but it was George Hotshot that approached us.
Okay.
In a way, I think George had a huge impact on my life because he was one of the first organization owner. And at the time, I think he was CEO at the time still. He wanted CLG to mean more than just being a professional team. He wanted to do things the right way. He had been watching me do podcasts and interviews for 6 months prior. And so when we met for the first time, he knew about my beliefs, my values, the way that I handle things. And he was like, the reason we're in this call is because like, I have the same vision as you about making the space better, about diversity, about caring for people and making everything better, and making CLG better. So we started talking, and then I changed my mind and I went along with Christine's idea of selling because it felt like together. I often say that, right? 1 + 1 = 3. I felt like CLG and UBINITED together would mean more than its unit alone. And the thing that I really didn't want to anymore, it was to be like a women's squad, the women's team, the female team. When I look at Imperial Female, I hate it.
Oh, that's why it was called Red, right? I see, right.
And so George allowed us to create our own branding that didn't target women or gender or vagina. You know, it was just like, you're going to be like another team that we support.
Right.
And they named this CLG Red. And when we joined, they started naming all their teams a different color. Their CLG Black, it was their academy team.
It was like the Academy League team, yeah.
At some point, Overwatch was CLG Green, you know? So, like, there was, like, a lot of different teams, but it made so much... You know, they even changed the color of the logo for us, which I thought was, like, so fucking phenomenal. And so we launched Red together, and without going too much into business, let's just say that Potter and I were supposed to get some equity of that CLG getting bought by MSG money, and we didn't get any.
I've heard a lot of people got screwed on that. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people didn't get it.
I got screwed so much. And so I didn't make money from that sale, even though it was a sale. But my only request was to keep like running CLG Red the same way that I ran UBINITED, and then we ran UBINITED. And I want to say for most of it, George and CLG did the best they could to keep through to that within, you know, different variables over the years that changed. Like,
did you guys actually have like a gaming house? Was it the case that you guys lived in a gaming house? Because I think CLG's other squads did, right?
Yeah, and so we moved, and at first the gaming house was being paid through our salary. So we pretty much didn't have a salary because we were paying for the house over there. And then year 2, they were able to kind of pay the house by itself and then increase their salary. So I was paid like $2,000, not even, but at least I was like in LA. And that's when I quit Ubisoft, and everyone thought I was crazy because I felt like a golden child at Ubisoft, and all the doors were opening finally. And like, you know, and I was like, I'm going to go on a sabbatical and go to LA for 1 year. And then UB kept calling, like, when are you coming back? When are you coming back? And I'm like, give me one more month. And then I never went back. So yeah. And so I jumped full time in 2015, moved to LA, and lived in the house, which
it's got to be different, right?
As amazing as it might sound, it was awful for the team. Like the worst thing that could have ever happened. We had no intimacy. I'm not really a morning person, and so when I'm in the morning, I'm just like, and then like it would piss off other people, and you know, it's just like. Having an office and going to the office and competing is really amazing. Boot camping is fine because it's just for a limited amount of time. But living and gaming and hanging out and being off work with your coworkers, you want to kill each other really quickly. So we were 6 girls in the house. Jane was also in the house because she became our manager. And we... Honestly, I think it was probably the slowly death of Potter and missharvey playing together was kind of during those years. Living together, even though she's like my sister for life, was not the best for our relationship. I think we were just like, yeah, I'm not a morning person, and I think she hated it. Well, even if it was hard, it actually had the effect though, because I remember actually in the early CSGO days you weren't on top, but actually this was the year you won ESWC again. You kind of got back to the top, right? That's true, actually. We did win in 2015 in Montreal, close to my family, so that was fucking
must be
amazing.
Cool as fuck. Did they come along?
Yeah, everybody came. It was unreal. I got recognized like as a local celebrity after that because it was like so big. And I did like TV shows because it was Montreal, like sure. So it was really, really, really big. There was no AC at that event. So I just want to say, imagine summer in Europe or in Canada, no AC. at a tournament, video game tournament. Oh my God, it was so hot.
I can imagine. Yeah. It's weird. If people don't know, I actually went to Montreal I used to be friends with Steele from Team 3D and I lived there for a few months. Yeah. If people don't know, what's really weird is in the summer, it's really hot. Like you have to have AC or you die. But then in the winter, it's like a foot of snow. It's crazy how the extremes are really wild there, right?
Today, actually, there's a snowstorm.
Right.
They're saying there's going to be 1 meter of snow today. So just guys, just think about it for a second. It's minus 20 degrees today, 1 meter of snow. And in the summer, it's like unbearably hot, like hotter than Los Angeles by far.
Yeah, it's wild.
When there's a heat wave in Los Angeles, people are like, you can't walk to work, Steph. There's a heat wave.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm Canadian. This is nothing.
Okay.
So, yeah, the extremes and the temperature can go like up and down.
Right.
The extremes are pretty wild here. But yeah, that summer was fucking nuts. Yeah, it was great to win. It was our first year at CLG. And it started off on the right track.
One of the people in the team you beat in the final was young Mimi, who people will now know from Valorant, and she had all this amazing success. I mean, the funny thing is now she's huge. Like from when she was in G2, her and Petra made that whole they almost embraced the TikTok aspect of the game, and they made the big personalities trash talk. Do you remember her back then? She was just presumably just some young Danish girl at this point, right?
Was Petra?
She's pretty small as well. I don't know if she was, but she's pretty small as well, right? She's kind of a little...
Maybe it was really small. She was always famous in Denmark, if I'm not mistaken, because she got Red Bull pretty young.
Right.
But, yeah, I think it was one of her first event. It's funny. I didn't compete that much versus Mimi, but I feel that I know her a lot because we've been around the scene together for so long, and now with Valorant, she plays against my players as well. But yeah, Mimi has this star personality. Like our vlogs worked really well right out the ghetto. Ghetto. Everything seems to fall into place really well for Mimi. And yeah, she's really small. Like really tiny.
It's why it's wild that her personality now is really fiery. She's a bit like a tiger. Yeah, she's a bit crazy, right?
Yeah, she doesn't give up. It feels like she's the new generation. There's different generation of competitors. I'm from one of the earliest, and then the zAAZ and Juliano is the late,
right.
And then Mimi and Petra is the next ones, and then you have the Anna and the new generations now, and so she was part of that revolution in 2015 of the new young players who were trying to make a name for themselves. So at the time, she was still beatable. we beat her.
Another person who was actually in this team that might be surprising to some people is that was actually also where Vilga was playing, and she was actually already a top women's player as far as I know. And actually, if people don't know, she was competing until very, very recently. I mean, she could probably still play tomorrow, right?
I think she's playing right now with Juliano. If I'm not mistaken, they just launched a team.
That was the new squad they were asking for sponsors for it. I say okay.
Yeah, right. I think, and she was on NIP. At the last Impact in Sweden. I really believe in that squad. But yeah, Vilga comes from, because we haven't talked about it a lot at all, but there's also a Russian era in women's.
Yeah, there was a lot of teams, right? Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of teams, a lot of good teams, and they were they're the ones that would wear really short shorts.
They would go crazy, yeah. They had booty shorts on, like you said. It was wild, yeah.
It was kind of cool, but also wild to go back to us wearing Adidas sweatpants, and then and they were stunning. And Vilga, if I remember, she was one of the youngest in these.
Right.
She came in a little bit later, and Vilga was one of the first ones to not compete for a country anymore, and she kind of joined.
Oh, right.
She kind of joined the zAAZ and the Juliano, who were Swedish, and then Mimi Danish. So they created one of the first kind of mixed.
Right.
Europe team, because back then there's so many teams, and most women's squad would play only in their countries.
Yeah.
So you would see a couple Polish teams, a lot of French teams. There was not a lot of a mix between the countries. So that's when Vilga started playing, and Vilga for me is the European Potter. She can do everything. She has a strong personality, and then she's showing it around, and her leadership is definitely made a mark in Europe.
One thing I wanted to also ask you about was, obviously, as the years went on, some teammates stayed, Potter, etc., but some of the other people came in who were new. What about, tell me about Di, for example. She's someone you played with for quite a few years, right?
Shit. Oh my God, Diane. We picked her up, I think in 2013. Diane has always been this like, well, first of all, she's also really short, like Mimi short. But Diane is very clumsy and forgetful. So in real life, she's hella funny. But when we picked her up, she was 14, 15, 16, and her alias was Girly.
Okay.
And I remember Potter telling her, okay, you're on the squad, congratulations. But the only requirement for you to join the squad is you have to change your alias. We're not going to have a UBINITED Girly on the team. And so Diane and I were brainstorming names for her to join our team. I think I found her on ESC Pugs, which is like Face-It Pugs nowadays. Yeah. So the way that I recruited a lot of my players, so I found so many women players in the scene, and the way that I always did it was just to play a lot and lurk these websites and find these women and then reach out to them and be like, hey, do you want to play with me? Do you want to pug with me? And I would watch their demos, and I didn't know the term scouting, but I was spending hours and hours of always scouting people, making sure I invited them to play the 10 women's, we called them, and like keeping them on my radar and whatnot. And Diane was someone for a long time that I had on my radar. And she became so quick of a friend to Potter. So it was just like a natural fit. They were like two peas in a pod really quickly. And to this day, I think that Diane has never fulfilled her potential, meaning I still think that she's always better than what she showed.
Okay.
I just think that she lacked the discipline and the work ethic to be probably one of the best, if not the best, opera in the world, and just a legend. She just, I think she just sat a bit on her success, and we did win World Cups with her, but I think she was way better than what she ever showed us. Still to this day, I think if she like really tried and focused, she could still make it. She could come back like Juliano and zAAz did. I really believe that she's better than everything that she's always shown us. So go Diane. You can still do it if you want.
Well, another woman who came along in this era as well, and obviously she actually was competing until not that long ago, actually. She was still one of the top women, was obviously your fellow Canadian CAth. Give me some thoughts on her.
CAth is very interesting. She's a bit like me. She joined and left our team 15 times.
Right.
And the reason why she left was never because of skill issues. It was always like everything else around. So I think CAth is an extremely passionate woman. I met her when she was 13. I know I keep telling you these girls that I meet when they're 12.
You are the best scout, apparently. Yeah, they're like, where are you finding them?
I'm not a predator.
Okay.
I swear. So CAth, when I found her sister was competing in the scene in Quebec. And I discovered that our younger sister was CAth, I thought, better than the older sister. And I took her over. I picked her up, and she was named Honey at the time, like the movie Honey. And we made this Canadian team, and on and off she would quit, come back. I would pick her back up, but for me, I think during like 12 years, I believed in her, and I always wanted to make a space for her. I think at some point she was the best player in the world, like maybe one or two events in a row. It was never a skill that was an issue. I always felt that CAth was like the outside, but I think she's really happy now. I think she has one or two kids. I don't know, but
fair enough.
She's doing great. Another great legacy from the Canadian pro gaming was definitely CAth.
And then one thing I wanted to ask was this, because I forgot to ask it before, but I'll ask now since we're talking about CSGO, if you could contrast the two, right? How good were you in 1.6 and were you as good in CSGO?
Actually tomorrow, so I started playing on St. Valentine's Day in 2003. So tomorrow, as we're filming this, it's going to be St. Valentine's Day tomorrow. So I'm going to be 22 years.
That's pretty good.
I can count, of Counter-Strike. So I went through a lot of eras, and I don't think you can be, outside of Forrest, who for me is like the greatest player of all time, can be like that consistent throughout the years. Right. I would say that at my peak 1.6, I reached my peak CSGO. But I was not consistent throughout CSGO as much as I was consistent on 1.6. I think CSGO required more practice effort and the competition was bigger and better, so you needed more discipline. So I had slumps throughout the years. Like I would have like 2-3 month slumps, and then I would come back, and like if I didn't dedicate like my full time and energy to gaming in CSGO, I wasn't as good. And 1.6, I was just like young and carefree and played so much. Like I would probably had 20,000 hours in 1.6 and barely 10 in CSGO, you know? So yeah, I would say I was better in 1.6, but I had a really high peak in CSGO where I played in it was called ESC Invite, which is like the highest level you can play in America at the time. So I was picked up by a men's team, and I competed versus like C9 and all that kind of stuff. I by Power too at the time, and I'm really proud of that era. I competed at the highest level versus men, and I put the numbers, and we don't talk about that still. Like no woman has ever made it into like I did, true. But I'm not gonna be like true, you know. But that was a really good era for me in CS:GO, but it wasn't consistent because I had other priorities.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes I messed up. Looking back, I'm like, fuck these priorities. I should have been full all in. Right. But, you know, at the time, I thought they mattered.
By the way, along those lines, when you say you had 20,000 hours in CS 1.6, if people don't know, that is fucking insane. So the reason I bring this up is because people might have thought naively from the outside, Miss Harvey, oh, you just go to ESWC every year. And actually, that's even something that people used to criticize them for. Oh, did they even play? Are they just only waiting for the 1 year? If you did 20,000 hours, you must have been playing CS basically almost the whole time you were in 1.6. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah, I think it might be close to the 15. I might have exaggerated, but
still a lot. Still a lot.
Yeah, it still was a lot. But one thing that was different from me than all the other players in NA is that, yes, it was only one tournament a year, and we could actually, in the early years, only play for 3 months and win the World Cup. Like that was how it was. We would come back together, make a squad for 3 months with SK Gaming, and beat everyone, and then the rest of the team would retire for 8 months. And so I didn't. I never retired. I would play on Guy's team. I would go to LAN with Guy's team. I would play in leagues. And so I think that was one of the main difference between me and other women around the world is that I never retired. I just competed, played, pugged, tried to get better all the time. That's all I did. I played CS.
One of the other tournaments later in CSGO, because actually one of the incredible things is I think people know you actually now from some of the outside of the server stuff and some of the media stuff, and they know you obviously like running the project, etc. But I don't think people know how long you competed in CSGO for. Like you were like, I noticed the circuit change. Like then it was like that WESG was the thing, right? That was where all the big money was, and if you could qualify, because then it was national teams again, so it was kind of a cool like throwback in a way, right?
Oh, WEGS was so fun. In a way, it's like not big in Counter-Strike because you had to have 100% of the people from the same country. And so in the men's scene, like outside of Navi, no one went because everyone had like different countries and stuff. And so people would like just not go, but it was so much money that like still some men would show up and play.
You could win like $100,000 even in the women's game. It was crazy, right? Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was $100,000 prize pool for women. And it was the first time I could represent my country in a way that, you know, we had the Canadian colors, the nation. Like it was more than just like having a little flag next to you at a World Cup. It was like actually your flags and like the anthems and all that kind of stuff. And for us women, it was huge. And I competed. Like I said, there's so many really great Counter-Strike players and just pro players in Canada. Like you might not know, it's a little bit like artists and stuff. You think they're American, they're Canadian. Like Pokimane is Canadian, Shroud is Canadian. Okay. You know, like, there's a lot of these pros who are actually Canadian, or like famous people. So we were able to make a Counter-Strike team with CAth, Goosebreeder, Rain, myself, and there was always like a different player. But skill-wise, that was like an insane roster on paper. And we finished third every time, bronze. Which actually one year I think we got stolen by the Chinese team. They were like straight up cheating. They were straight up cheating. The coach was talking in Chinese to the players, and the referee was just like
because he didn't know what they were saying, right? Okay.
Yeah, straight up cheating in China with Chinese. Don't ban me, China.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, I don't know, it was phenomenal to just compete in these events. And it was when CLG actually benched me for performance. And so 1 year, actually, Duncan, 1 year, we beat CLG.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
As Team Canada, because there's only one slot for North America, between Canada and the US. And we beat CLG in a best of 3 to get there, Goosebreeder ran it. And it was like one of the most gratifying moments in my career because I beat the team that cut me. And we had a pug, and I was the leader of that squad. I was the leader in Opera. I was like the fallen of Team Canada. And I was just like, shit. This is it. I still have the recording of me yelling.
Oh, were you trash talking?
So loud. No, well, when I won.
Oh, right, okay. Right.
You know, just like,
sure.
Like that deep, I'm dying kind of yell. Oh, that was so gratifying. Like these are the kind of moments that you play for, right? When you can like put it back to someone's face.
By the way, that's also kind of crazy that you got benched. Because look, okay, if you say it was for performance, fair enough, that's like a sport. But you were the one who made that team. It's your team. Like, couldn't you, if you'd have wanted, couldn't you have just been like, I'm not benched. I'm staying in the team. Could you have forced
No,
away?
it was on CLG. I gave away all my rights.
Oh, right,
running
I
that
see.
squad, right?
Right.
And then so it was when I was in the house and I got benched. When I was in the house, which was also really fucking weird, because I lived with the players who benched me and they picked up someone else. And man, that day was so awful because we went to Universal the day before and I was so happy and I was like, we're perfect. And the next day I got benched. I have some vlogs still. I did a vlog at Universal of me with the new player we just picked up. And then they benched me and then they picked up Amy after tryouts, which to be fair, Amy is a great player and I'm glad she has the career that she has. But yeah, they gave me, you know, when someone gets benched in a gaming house or gets cut, they usually like ask you like you have 3 days to pack your bags and leave. But
it's actually like Big Brother, funnily enough. You get kicked out, right?
My whole life was there. So they were like, okay, this is kind of fucked up. So we're going to give you like a month to figure it out. And so I planned everything, packed my things, put it in storage. And then I was out of the house. But it was very interesting for that month living with them. Yeah, we went through a lot.
I also saw that later on, again, I think people would be amazed. I don't think they know how long you played for. I saw that you were at that famous DreamHack that they had where they had a female tournament, the Valencia one. And I saw that you went with the lineup where you had like bENTIA was with you, Semphis was coaching the team. You actually had that player I wanted to ask about, the one called masq, who, if people don't know, she was actually one of the people, we did that esports salon one. Yeah. She was one of the women who at the time didn't really play with the women and kind of just wanted to just play with the guys and had like she had like a very sort of like lofty ideal that she could be like a top player or something, right? Can you give me some thoughts on this period of this player?
Yeah, so I think masq went through a lot of evolution in her life and her career. I think she's one of the most beautiful person inside and out that I've ever met. But when I originally heard of her, it was through sometimes not the nicest interviews and stuff. Like she was pretty much kind of bashing the women.
She was a bit edgy, yeah. She was one of the ones who kind of didn't want women to stay segregated, right?
and in my mind, I was watching her play. I would play with her, and I was like, she's not even good enough to be on our team, and she's like bashing me. You know, that's how I felt about masq. But eventually, I had the chance to meet her and play with her, and we became really close friends. Actually, she came to my town, and I went to her town for fun, like a couple years ago, just like hang out, and I met her family and everything. She met my family. Like, I really love Bree in and out. She's such a beautiful soul. But at the time, she was really against the concept of women squad and women teams. And so I just got benched from CLG, and then out of nowhere, bENTIA gets benched from CLG as well. And so we have, and I think we're still both signed to CLG at the time. And so we have to wear our CLG jersey in Valencia.
Right.
They allow us to compete, even though, you know, we're not playing for CLG. And we pick up 2 other players or 3 other players. I think it was Claudia, masq, and I forgot who was her 5th. And on stage, we actually play CLG. There was 7 CLG players on stage wearing the CLG jersey. That always cracked me up. It was always such a funny thing to me. But, you know, we kind of made a pug team. We qualified in an A, finished 2nd. And we actually did really well in the tournament, considering we didn't practice and whatnot. I felt that if we put a little bit more effort into it, we could become something big. But it was when there was just no money in gaming and no money in women. It was like just a little bit of a bubble that was bursted. But I do remember going to Valencia. And I remember Potter was casting her on the desk for analyst. And she came to me after and she said, Steph, you still got it. You can still, you can still make a team. And like, the thing about Christine is she's not the one to throw fucking flowers.
She's pretty harsh, right? She's kind of a bit of a spicy character.
She never will go out of her way to tell you something nice. And so when she does it, it's like, it's so powerful. So I remember to this day when she told me that, and I was like, oh my God, this means so much. And that was a great tournament. And the pandemic hit and everything went to shit.
I mean, that was something I was going to ask. If anyone looks, it's kind of suspicious because your career goes up to 2020, then the world shuts down, and then that's the end as a pro, right? After that, it was media things. So, was that what made you just decide to quit because it was all online? What was it?
Well, so I got benched from CLG, and a couple months later, the pandemic hit. And so I don't have a team. There's no tournaments. And then CLG offers me, right before the pandemic, like 1 month or 2 before the pandemic, they offer me a position as a director of business development at CLG, which, for those who know nothing about business, being a director in the esports org that is ran by Madison's Garden and that is owned by Madison's Garden is like pretty much out there. Like, there's not a lot better than that. And so I told myself, okay, I'm just going to give it a shot for a couple months and see how it feels. And
by the way, without being rude, I imagine it's a pretty fucking good paying job as well. That sounds like it's an executive type job, right?
Not bad.
Right.
Yeah, it was not bad. I think that I still don't really know how to fight for myself when it comes to salaries and these kind of things. Okay. But I think it was decent still. And it was, for women to get executive jobs overall in any industry, but especially in gaming, you need someone that is very open-minded, has pretty much no prejudice, and can see you for who you are behind your gender. Because the way that I felt my whole career, and this was like that at Ubisoft, this was like that in pretty much when I was, I remember at CAth, I was an analyst on DreamHack, 2016 DreamHack Dallas. The first time I think there was ever a women analyst on one of these big events. I think it was me.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, every time I reach these moments, I'm never competent according to everybody else, right? I made my way there because I slept with someone or because I'm a tokenized person or whatever, right? And so the way that I always say is like quite often men need to fuck up to. So men are assumed competent until they fuck up. And then even then they need to fuck up a couple times to like lose their kind of status. While women, we have to prove that we deserve our spot even after getting it.
Right.
And so the fact that someone that's in, he's now VP at Madison Square Garden. He was like one of my mentor for knowing how to executive at a company, to be honest, and dealing with a lot of politics and stuff. When he said, I want you to run a bunch of departments at CLG, and I want it to be your vision, and you're gonna like run it, and I know you can because of everything that you've done. I was like, this is kind of a unique opportunity. It's a lifetime opportunity, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. Pandemic hit. There was no more competition at CLG. I started rising and rising, sorry. And then I started doing more casting and stuff, and Valorant came out, and then like, I was involved in the Valorant scene, and so yeah, I never went back. But in my mind, Duncan, I never retired.
You forced out, right?
I was just on hiatus. I never said I retire, which for like, I would say for the first 3 years I was in denial, and now I'm embracing it. I think I'm retired.
By the way, one player I forgot to ask about, I will ask now, is since you mentioned you played in those Canadian teams in WESG, obviously you also played with Goosebreeder, who people will know she still competes to this day. She's also been like one of the later generation people. What was she like to play with?
Oh, Goose. So Goosey, I found Goosey. She was 17. She'd never traveled on a plane.
Wow.
I have so many stories of Goosey. She's so naive. Like, I remember we were in Poland and she was eating pierogies with her hands. Like, she was she was so rough, like sheltered. And she's Lebanese, but I think she was raised like a white Canadian, Like,
right. Okay.
She was like very sheltered and never tasted anything else but Lebanese and Canadian food. And so Goosebreeder was, and she's still to this day like this, but she learned how to control and maintain and be more disciplined. She's very, how can I explain Goosebreeder? There's a butterfly that goes around and she will follow the butterfly. And
she's a dreamer or something. Okay.
She's a dreamer. She's like this pure soul, no malice, never fights, loves everyone.
Okay.
And when we played with her, she was not ready. We believed in her. We played with her for like 1 year or less than 1 year. We went to an event, and then I remember it was always Christine that wanted to cut the people. By the way, I'm way too nice to like do this.
Okay.
I know she's right though every time, but it's like super hard for me to let people go. Like, I believe in them. I think if they put the right angle, they're gonna figure it out. And I think everyone can fucking do it. And that's why I was the scout, because I was always like, oh, I believe in that player, and like, But Goose was just not ready, and so we parted ways with her. And then after that, she joined Karma, I think, and Dignitas, and she became one of the best players in the world. And then she was ready. And so we unfortunately didn't play with her during that era. When she came back to CLG, I was out, and so we never really played with her outside of Team Canada. But during a short era of time, Goose and I were goofing around, and I like right now I talk to her almost every day. Obviously, she's at FlyQuest, so we're really close. We're closer than we've ever been, her and I. We had ups and downs where we didn't talk to each other a bit, and then we started like talking again. So
even as actually you were having all this CSGO career, again, people might not put the timeline together. You were also doing all this media stuff. Like, it wasn't just interviews anymore, but gaming. If people don't know, you literally won a competition called Canada's like smartest person or something crazy. You won that, and then obviously you did Big Brother as well. Like, give us some thought. How do you get into this angle? Like, how does this world open up for you?
Yeah, that's like some part of my life that most people don't realize. I'm in the ecosystem of the mainstream media in French Canada. So I was a game reviewer on French MTV on their gaming show, reviewing games. And that was in the early 2010s, 11, 12. Whenever there's a gaming news, like let's say a new game coming out or Minecraft breaks whatever in the world, or Fortnite starts as a new thing. Radio and TV, I get messages and like, can you be on the show tonight? Or can
you're like the talking head that's the expert or something, right? I see, right?
Yeah. And whenever there's a gaming show or chronique or like, can you be that person? So right now I'm a collaborator on 2 gaming show in Quebec where I come in and we play games and I review them, because French MTV died a couple years ago, but there's new stuff like Quebec TV and I'm like doing stuff there. So for the Canada TV, I won Canada's Smartest Person, and every time they scout me. So I'm sure they're like trying to figure out like people who are a little bit out of the ordinary, and I don't fit the mold. I don't fit a mold, right? I'm like a woman pro gamer, so I'm in STEM. There's a lot of the time they love having women in STEM. My hair colored, so I'm kind of diversity because of it, So, so I made Big Brother Celebrity. I won Big Brother Celebrity in 2022, and then this year they called me back for the All-Star, and so I said yes. And so I'm really part of the. I get asked to go to premieres in Quebec of like movies and stuff, which I never go because that's not really my thing, but I get asked every time. So like to wear a dress, be on the red carpet, take pictures, to promote, like, but I don't really do it. But so I'm part of that ecosystem, but I'm still a bit right outside of it because I have my own career that has nothing to do with that. So I don't jump in full time, but I do have like a French Canadian agent and an American agent, and so I try to manage both career, and mainly I'm also a teacher in Canada at a university, a professor, and teaching like a class that I made everything about it. It's called Ethic, Health and Wellness in professional gaming and in esports, where I talk about cyber citizenship and the links to gaming and pro gaming, all that kind of stuff. But so like I try to change and make the space better everywhere I can. So I always tell myself, which kind of burns me out, but hey, what if that one radio interview that I'm doing at 5 a.m. Western time for Canadian radio will change some little girl's life because their parents all of a sudden will be like, oh, I'm going to let my child play. And this might feel a little bit like like I'm not being humble saying that, but it happened hundreds of times where little girls or moms or parents and even coworkers at Ubisoft, teammates in pro gaming were like, hey, I saw you on TV that year, and then I started Counter-Strike because of you. Or I didn't know if I could do it, and I started studying in video games because of you, and now I worked at Ubisoft with them and that kind of stuff. So like, I really feel that every time I wake up or I answer a call or I show up, it's not for me. It's for the little person that I'm gonna, and it goes back to like the beginning of our interview, that little light that I can create for someone. And I don't know this, but it could change your life. And that's the reason why I still do it, because I don't need to do it. I'm at FlyQuest, I'm doing great. But I care about the little people. I care about educating the population about healthy gaming habits, about consuming and having parents like my parents who supported me as a player, and like how it made me like blossom in the person who I am today. So I hope it answers your question.
Yeah.
I think
let me ask you a follow-up. Along those lines then, that's something that I know some people who are very, very good at their job in esports who are women, sometimes they don't want like the responsibility of like being a pioneer or being the face. They just want to be someone who's cool and they're good at their job and they do their thing. You said it burned you out a little bit. Can it be stressful to do that? Do you sometimes feel like the expectations are very big? Yeah,
because, I can fuck up. Not every one of my interviews is good. And also, when you become this face in the face of the public, that's when they can start hating on you, right?
True.
Because you're no longer this little girl from the community. You're like bigger than that. And so managing that spotlight and that hate, and also personally being a woman in that space, and like reading things like, oh, you know, I've had ups and downs with my weight and like my self-esteem and stuff throughout my careers. I'm like a yo-yo person. I gain 60 pounds, I lose 60 pounds like every couple of years. And so, you know, being in the face of the public, I have to deal with sometimes myself being a lot bigger, and then like reading the comments and like,
oh, people brutal,
all that
just
kind of
writing
stuff.
horrible shit. Holy shit, right?
Yeah. Like really, really bad, or like,
wow.
And so I've had to, and it's not like nobody has ever told me how to handle it, because I was one of the first, right? Even during the Gamergate era, like I was almost like, I remember being attacked by 4chan and stuff, but I dodged it. You know, I really dodged it. I was that close of like of losing everything.
Thing is, though, when you say that, though, like you were doing it from the beginning, I always say this to people, even if everyone acts cool, like, oh, I've been around a long time, it still hurts. If you read it, it still hurts. It still touches you, the nerve, doesn't it? If someone says something horrible, yeah. No matter how long you've been in the scene.
It still hurts.
Yeah.
It still hurts. And like, you know, Big Brother, it hurts when you come out and you read the things.
Right.
And like, you know,
I hadn't even thought that. I guess the gossip culture around Big Brother must be crazy, right? All the people, all the housewives watching and hating on people and stuff, right?
Yeah, especially like, I don't think the middle-aged women,
they don't like you?
Me.
Oh, why not?
Because I target their little cute girls.
Oh, right, like, I see. Know? Right.
Because when I'm in Big Brother, I don't let big like groups and stuff get away with things. I did that a couple times, and like the little, you know, and anyway. So that being said, and so dealing with all of that is hard. And like the thing that people don't realize is when you go on radio, let's say, like I said earlier, I have about 100 public appearances a year. That means every 3 days I'm on radio, or I'm doing an interview, or like,
I see you every on Instagram, you're always flying. You're just always getting on another plane.
I had 80 flights last year, right? And a lot of it is not paid. A lot of it is, I wake up at 5 a.m., do that radio, go back, then I have to be at work, and then I have to blah, blah, blah. And so it makes no sense. Like my therapist, my psychologist, they're always like, why do you do these things? My friends, my family, why do you do these things, you know? And the one thing that they always tell me, if you say yes to everything, you say no to yourself.
Oh, right.
And that's true, that's right? Deep. It's really deep. And it's also like, if you keep saying yes, you won't be able to say yes. And that's going to be even worse than saying yes to everything, like, you know, than saying no to a couple of things. So they're all right. And I need to be able to gauge it and manage it a little bit better. But I would say I'm 38 right now. For the first 37 years, I said yes to every single thing, because I always say it's bigger than me. It's like showing up. If the other people don't want to show up, then I'll show up. I remember actually when Dallas, I was asked to do the desk 2016, I knew the hate I was going to get. I remember talking about it with Hayes and Cutler back then. And I was like, I know I'm ready for this. I know how to be a good analyst, but is the community ready? I don't think the community is ready. And so that was 8 years ago. And they told me, yeah, they're not ready. You're going to get fucking destroyed out there, but you should still do it. And knowing that is like, hey, no, you're going to go on one of the biggest Counter-Strike tournament in the world on the analyst desk. You're going to come prepared more than anybody else because you're so fucking nervous. And like back then, the analysts didn't get prepared. I remember they just showed up. They didn't care. And I had my Excel sheets, and like HLTV.org wasn't what it is today. Like there was the staff.
No, you have to manually check stuff. It's really hard, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would create like these huge Excel sheets of like all the stats, and to a certain point I got lost in it. Like, you know, I was learning how to be an analyst, you know, it was like I had to find the balance between like instinct and coming prepared, but I didn't have that at the time. Anyway, that being said, and I knew it was going to get destroyed, and I got destroyed, you know, and I did a great job, I think. For my first event, it wasn't perfect. I stumbled in my words. I'm French Canadian. I have an accent. I can rub people the wrong way. It was not perfect. But I think for my first event, I did a great job. And I was never invited again.
Okay.
Because what I was told from ESL or DreamHack back then was you're creating too much heat.
Right.
The hate is too strong.
Yeah.
And so it was not like today where everyone tries to have women.
Oh, people are very welcoming now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was creating too much heat, and there was like, it was too much. And so I took a step back, and if I wanted, I could still, make it work. I could still fucking fight for it, but it's not something I want right now. And so whatever. And back then I was still a pro player. I was like, okay, well, I tried, I tried as in like, I can't do it, but I did it once. It was great. And then, it's just not my priority right now. I just want to compete and be the world. So that being said, that I think one of the comment that hurt me the most throughout this whole life, whatever I was told, like people would kill me, rape me, all that kind of stuff.
Hell, okay.
The thing that hunts me the most still to this day, someone wrote FATVEY, fat V, like Harvey, but fat V. And I know it's so silly, right? But it was an HLTV picture. It was SK Gaming didn't make us women shirt. It was white polos. They were transparent. You could see our underwears, and they were way too big for us. And this is the last event I did with them. And after, I'm like, this is unacceptable. And someone wrote in the comment of my picture of Fat V on HLTV. And to this day, I'm still like,
it's in your head, right?
Man.
Right.
Fuck, man. About 10, 12, 15 years ago, this one guy wrote Fat V on HLTV, and I still remember it.
By the way, I actually agree with you. The sad thing back then was it wasn't even about whether someone was good enough to be an analyst. The audience wasn't ready. Because I can tell you, when I came along and I actually got the one time I got to hire people and do work for Flashpoint, that was when Potter used to do all the dream hacks. And then I think they only threw her like one little like real like big one. And she was just like, on like 2 games or something. And I remember when we hired her, I didn't even know this till I worked with her, being like, she should be on like all the events. And I actually think, sadly, if COVID hadn't happened and we'd had LANs, she wouldn't have gone to Valorant. She did. If people don't know, she actually started playing Valorant because we were all stuck in our rooms, etc. And she just started playing the game again. I think other than that, like if you think of some of the big people who are in the scene now, especially by the way, in games like League of Legends, they've had some of the best people who the analysts were the women. But I think Potter, if she hadn't have gone to Valorant, she could be on the desks now. She was really good.
I think I've always believed in Christine's career as a broadcaster and as like a talent. I remember I would tell her when we were still pro gamers, you can do this, you'd be so good, like people will respect you. She has this aura of like, you cannot fuck with her, And even though she's very sweet on the desk, I think she's kind of like not herself.
She gets away with it, put it that way. That's why in Flashpoint we were trying to do like skits where she was a bit edgier. Yeah. Because she acts like an auntie when she's on the desk, like, oh, she's so lovely. And I always used to tell her, where's the person who was screaming at all the people at the LAN and saying, this isn't what you're like in a team.
She's not like that. And even like on the desk, I'll say something and she's like, oh, I agree with you. And I'm like, no, you fucking don't. Right. I know you don't. So she's really good at gaming is her life. She's fucking good at like figuring things out and just being that person that we want to hear. Yeah. And I think for me, she was already tier 1. She is tier 1 in Valorant. Like whenever, like she can do any broadcast she wants anywhere in the world. But like in CS, I think she started to feel really comfortable at Flashpoint with you guys, and I think she would be everywhere tier 1.
I think finals. So. Yes. Yeah.
Now, if she was around in CS, I think for me. Not only was Putter the right person to break that mold, because you can't really fuck around with someone that's 6'2".
True.
She's 6'2".
Yeah.
She's like passionate and opinionated, and she's really knowledgeable. But I think it was the right timing for the community to open up and be ready for someone like that. I mean, Valorant, it's like always 50-50, the desk and everything. Right. So it's like easier. It's easier over there. But yeah, she's great. Fucking love her.
I do have one other big brother question, which goes, I was asking you about this before we start the interview. So the one thing I want to ask you is, if I think about the themes in this interview, the one area you weren't very suited to be on Big Brother is, Big Brother's like Game of Thrones. You're supposed to be backstabbing people and making alliances. As people have seen in your career, that's not your style. You're the person who just goes there, you stay there forever, you work really hard, you don't want to cut people. Like maybe it worked the first time, but that feels like a pretty brutal experience to go through.
Yes. So Big Brother is the opposite of my personality.
Right.
You have to lie, you have to backstab, you have to play around people. It's the opposite of my personality. However, apparently I'm really great at game shows, and I found my way of being myself in Big Brother, which can only work for so long. But I've throughout the weeks, because it's long. It was 92 days.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so it was 3 months. 3 months. I cannot talk to anyone. I'm in this house, Pyrina house, 24/7. Like, Big Brother is the ultimate fucking experience. Even Survivor physically is harder, but it's only like 40 days. Like, Big Brother in Canada, it's in fucking tense. And so throughout my experience of Big Brother, I realized that I could not only twist the truth, which really helped me, but also believe the things I was saying, even though maybe they wouldn't be true in a couple of weeks if the circumstances changes. So if, like, all of a sudden circumstances changes, I'm like, yo, I really wanted to play with you, but then this happened and this changed everything. So, but this is something that I learned throughout my experience. But I want to say I was extremely loyal. I put myself in danger instead of my teammates.
Right.
I gave powers to my teammates instead of keeping them for myself. Like, I was this true team play person. And even when I was winning challenges, and when I won the most challenges in my season, and I would still not be. This is what I'm wondering if it's a woman thing, but I would still not be feared as this.
Right.
As this, like, big player. They would still fear other people more than me, which was great for me because I was able to maneuver in a way that was like, so I was extremely loyal, and I didn't trash talk anyone. There's nothing beyond the scene that really, and to the point where I would say the top 6 outside of me all made, like, the gossip magazines and, like, the shows and stuff, and I won and I didn't. Because I was, like, so clean and just, like, proper. And, like, I came out of the house and the PR was like, yeah, there's nothing much to say about you. Everybody is kind of, like, loves you, and there's no drama around your name. So you're free to go back with your life. You don't need anything. And so I went back this year. This year was 1,000 times harder. This is a crazy experience. I'm still going through therapy for the one this year. And I came out 3 weeks ago. And I saw my therapist like 7 times. It's been, you learn more when you lose, right? That's just the fact.
Right.
And so I lost Big Brother the first time I won, so I didn't open any box of anything. I was just like, I won. I don't want to think about anything else. This time I lost. And for the first time in my life, I'm opening the box of, which I don't know if you can relate. I hope you can, but winning cannot be my personality, and success cannot define my happiness. Right. Because I'm gonna die unhappy, and I'm gonna die, never have reached the goal of, like, winning the world. But in my head, nobody had ever won Big Brother twice. So in my head, I had to win Big Brother twice. In the world, it's never been done. Oh, wow. No one in the world had ever won Big Brother twice. So I came in with 0% almost probability of winning the show. And I was like, maybe Miss Harvey can do it. So, like, so it's unrealistic expectation that I put on myself. But it's been like that my whole life. That's why we're competitors. And I'm sure it's a problem that a lot of pro players and sports athletes, when they retire, their whole personality is based upon success, upon the game, about the sports they're doing, and, like, everything else doesn't matter. So we're opening that box with my therapist of, like, success shouldn't define my happiness, because anyway, as soon as I win something like Big Brother, the next day I'm like, now what? What is the next step? So I'm never going to be happy with success. I'm sure Dan, Apex right now, he feels like he's the same than me. I'm sure right now Dan is thinking, now what? Even though he's, like, at the fucking top of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, one thing you've touched on here is another thing I do think you were a pioneer in. I said, even going back to the media days early on, is you actually understood branding in a way. A lot of the players, like you've just said here, their identity was, I'm the best player, or I'm the best player from Sweden, or, which, by the way, the problem with that is it changes. That's fleeting, or maybe people aren't as interested. You always had all these things going around. Like, first of all, even though back in the day, like, I was a bit more of an edgy person, I used to think, like, what the fuck is this?
You were an edgy person?
It's all right, we'll get to that. But when I would see you do your stream, which you streamed a lot, by the way, also when you were a pro in CSGO, you would always have that thing where it was like pew pew or whatever. That was like your like little catchphrase, which, by the way, it worked. I remember it to this day, all the years later. And I noticed you still do it on Twitter for all your other stuff when you go into somewhere. That's almost like, when like Koreans are like fighting, like the thing where it's just associated with them. Then, as you say, you've also changed your hair color like 1 million times. That's another thing that's just a changing thing as the seasons go. You were one of the first people to actually embrace doing vlogs. By the way, there's a lot of players to this day don't do that stuff. Like, are you someone where is branding a key part for you? Is it important that you get some say and control over your image?
I have the fear of missing out all the time. And when I saw that streamers were getting more popular than professional players, I was like, this is fucking unfair. I've been a professional player for almost 13 years.
Right.
And these streamers are bigger than us after like 2 months of streaming, and they're making more money than us. So I remember in 2012, Twitch was still in infantile era. I was like, I can't miss that boat. I'm missing that boat. I'm already late. In my brain, I was late. And so I started streaming and stuff. And within like 6 months, I became one of the biggest women streamer in the world. I had thousands of concurrent viewers. I was always on the front page of Twitch. I was making more money in 2 nights than I was making at Ubisoft in a month.
Oh, wow.
Like, it was a good time. And everybody at UB was telling me like, quit, go full time, quit. And I was like, no, it doesn't fulfill me to be a streamer. What fulfills me is making the games, is like, and that was always the problem with me. I feel that all these media stuff, even though I understood branding and I did vlogs and I social media, I was super into it when it came out. I just don't like it. Like, in the end, it doesn't fulfill me. And what I'm disappointed about is if I had continued more, I would make more money now to be able to do the things that I care about.
Oh, right.
And in the end, it would have been worth it. But I remember Pokimane was asking me her advice.
Wow, right.
Like, for streaming.
Sure.
And she was asking me, should I quit school? And like, all the kind of stuff. And we used to talk about it a lot. And so the thing is that I don't think that I fucked up, but I do wonder what would have happened if I chose the full-on sell-out influencer route that wasn't fulfilling me at all, and then use that money to fulfill something bigger. A bit like to the really superficial level, like a Disguised Toast, who has like his little team now, and he does like these little things. But I think, obviously, I do have a great org with FlyQuest and all that kind of stuff, but it's just like, I'm still always limited by the amount of money I can invest in. And if I could have these big partner and these, it could have changed things. But yeah, no one remembers, but missharvey was at some point a pretty good streamer.
Okay. By the way, one thing I thought was a cool theme I was thinking about when we were doing this interview was, even though the generation of SK ladies that had all this success, but it was just in these female tournaments, and again, there was so much scrutiny of like, are they even pros? Do they practice? Are they only playing once a year? I'll actually just make a point here that if you put it together and look at the big picture, it's kind of crazy, which is because back then there wasn't loads of money, and if people say you get famous on like a nerd website. It wasn't like there was TV back then, and the games weren't even streamed. So what shows that generation and that team had like something extra, some drive to compete is. I'll run down some of the things these people did. So as you say, bENTIA actually for real plays like real life poker guys, where she goes to like the casinos, etc., and she's like playing in the tournaments, etc. You can see it all on the social media. Jane, as you say, became a literal scientist in real life. Potter, a lot of people don't know this, in the time where she wasn't playing very much pro, she went and had a job where she told me all about this, where she would like design the 3D model of like someone's fucking dentures or something. And what's mental is she was even trying to hire other pro gamers like Moses and stuff. And she was saying, actually, for pro gamers, it's the best because I can do it like 4 times faster than everyone else because I've got like the Twitch muscles, which I was like, what the fuck? So she was doing some like almost like science level shit as well. You've done like all these like game shows, you won these massive things, branding, etc. Everyone, it wasn't just like you were just players. You obviously had like some ambition, you had some drive, these people, right?
You couldn't, half of the people here in the pros here couldn't make it back then, for sure. Because you had to be able to have a successful career that would allow you to pretty much play 40, 60 hours a week gaming and travel the world to compete on your own So you would take vacations to go and stuff like that. And so, like, for me, the Valorant scene actually puzzles me a lot. So many people retire because they can't do that full time and they're not salaried. And I'm just like, guys, like, what do you mean you can't do that full time? So you're gonna retire? Like sometimes the big break comes when you play at night or when you get picked up or on a random roster. Like if you quit, I always said, Duncan, if you quit, it's the only finality that will be there. It's because you're no longer around. You never know. You only need one yes, right? You can have a million no's. That one yes can change your life. So if you quit, you will for sure never get that yes. And so back then, that's how we felt. If we quit, there's no longer an opportunity for us to get that one yes. And so if you think back, even like I think Zepnik's at a master, like all of these pros, we all did something on the side. Very rarely you had a pro who had no school, like really quit because of, like, all he did was gaming. All the women that I know, like Alice is a high-level banker. She's always been a banker. So like all of us, the women that were part of the legacy, this SK Ladies, UBINITED, Red legacy, were all doing great things.
Right, I actually want to ask a question about your current job at FlyQuest, because if people don't know, as you say, you have this strange title, which I've never heard before. And, if you remember, Khan in Fnatic was the first chief gaming officer. You are the first chief culture officer, as far as I've never heard that role. And also, it doesn't surprise me, this goes hand in hand, you obviously run the women's division, which I noticed you also didn't call the women's thing. You called it Red again, right? So give me some thoughts on being in FlyQuest.
Yeah, so at FlyQuest, I'm part of the 3 C-suite, so the 3 executives. So we have the president and chief gaming officer, and then the CEO. And then there's me, the other C-suite. So I would say chief culture officer is like the term that we came out with that fit the most of my responsibilities. But when we look back, CEO and I think we should have called myself maybe chief strategy officer or something like that. So yes, one of my vertical is handling all of the women roster, the Red roster, which now expanded to gender expanding and more. So it's not just women. And yes, we took the Red branding again because I thought it was really clever, and still to this day, it's really clever. But I also ran all of the game FGC division, so fighting game division, and for a long time, I ran the CS2 division, the Australians, but I went to Big Brother and I passed it on back to the chief gaming officer, and we're still figuring out what's going to happen now that I'm back. So I'm just back to FlyQuest. So I have 27 players under me in the last couple of, since my time at FlyQuest, and a lot of the divisions, I started them all with the collaboration of my chief gaming officer because they were not there when I joined. So I like to say that when I say I try to make this space better in gaming better, like it's also to pick up these kind of programs that I think are underdeserved and these kind of things. So back to my role. So that's one thing. And then everything that has to do with the culture of a company. So, for example, what are the values of a company? What are the goals? How do we do payroll is a little reductive, but how do we do reviews? How do we grade the employees? What kind of benefits they have? What kind of how do we make sure that they're happy? So pretty much like everything that has to do with being someone that works at FlyQuest, I'm in charge of. And it can be just as nitty-gritty as I launch trainings or internships, or as big as, for example, for me, there's no disparity between business and competitive. And that's something that at CLG I was like fighting for, and at FlyQuest I was able to accomplish, which is like, if you're a pro player, if you're Bwipo, if you're like a League of Legends players, you are held to the same standards as the other business players, business people, and the same standard as the Red team. So everyone is treated equal, but in a positive way. So you get the same benefits and you get the same responsibilities, which mean once a month, you got to show up to the business meeting and get to know about FlyQuest and the company and get involved. And for me, that's super important as a culture of a company. It makes the staff closer to the players in a way that they can create better content. They can feel like they belong in the success of the team, but also the players, they feel like they matter there, that they're not just a number, and they care about our org more than any org that they've been at before, because they know all the staff by names, and then like, you know, that cohesion, I think is very unique to FlyQuest. I don't know any other org in the world that creates that kind of dynamic. And that's something that a lot of people didn't believe in when I joined FlyQuest, but for me, it's super important. Like, as a player, if you exposed the players to the company's business side and you get them to care about it, they will just be better players for your org. So that's just as simple as that in my mind. So I do that. I also handle a lot of strategic partnerships. I'm part of the partnership teams. I also, you know, we're jumping into the 2xKO world and running tournaments and stuff. So I handle a lot of the broadcasts over there. I manage all these events. Silly things like, we're building things on the side. We're having side business venture. A lot of it I'm running. And so my role is very diverse. And it's unclear what I do, but I think the culture part is really important, because I do feel like in a space where there's always going to be people with more money, why would you choose team A or team B?
Right.
I want people to say I choose team B because they do great things, they care about me, and they make a difference in the space. And so hopefully that's FlyQuest for a lot of the fans and a lot of the players and employees. And that's the company I would want to be in when I was a player. And I hope that I can make that space just a school for everybody else.
I know what you mean when you say that you just can't say no when you feel like you have to do something. Because one thing when I was doing my research that blew my mind is I'm thinking of this modern era where, like I said, you're like a celebrity in Canada, you've done all these things, you've got like executive jobs, you're a player, you fucking manage it. You still do like online cups for girls. You're doing like all the Supergirl Gamer Pro things. You still do online cups as well. You still cast them. Like, there's no way that pays. Come on, you just do it for the love of it. Right? You just can't quit.
I can't quit. Okay, one fun fact. I was part of a couple of websites who were doing interviews with women gamers and women pro gamers. I launched my own and stuff, but even when I was winning world championships.
Oh, right.
So I wanted to show that there was just not SK Gaming, there was more. And I was like, so I became like a journalist and whatnot. Or I remember E-League in Atlanta, I wanted to go. I didn't want to just go to watch. So I booked myself a gig with ESEA. I think it was ESEA. I forgot who it was, where I would just interview players and pros while I was there. Why not? The first major was in Sweden. I fundraised my way through it, gave half to charity. The other half was to pay for my travel to Sweden. And I got hired by ESEA. I don't think they ever... If they paid me like $200, like nothing, right. to interview pros and like, I'm going to be there. Might as well just like give back to the community and like do interviews and whatnot. And so, yeah, I never say no. I try to always, you know, do things left and right and show up. And whenever I get asked to do something, whether it's to talk to a student's class in a small neighborhood, or if it's to attend a major, I usually will always try to say yes.
If you notice in this interview, a theme I often do when we address the topic of people who are women in gaming is I don't make it that they're just women in gaming. I don't make it like the obvious question, what does it feel like to be a woman? Or, you know, should you be a role model? I don't ask those typical questions, right? And one of the reasons why is I've actually found the best way that you can sort of make people interested and sort of draw them into, like, oh, what is it like? It's just actually to tell your own life experience, to say what happened to you, what you were thinking, what you were going for, what you go, instead of like sort of the PR angle of like, oh, I have to say this, or we all have to present the same front. So one thing I want to ask you, it's an unusual question. I've never asked a question like this on my show before. It's going to go like this. As I said earlier, look, the joke is I still am, but I've just polished it down a bit. I was obviously a pretty edgy person 10 years ago, but I was at my peak doing all the events and banting with Shaq and stuff. Like, yeah, I was living my rock star fantasy out, you know, where I was the kind of crazy wild man and the bad boy of analysis and stuff. But one of the areas was, obviously, because back then, if you think about how I am on the mail desk, like, I will say, like, the 13th best team in the world is shit. So, obviously, I was never going to be like, oh, check out these women gamers. I was always like, who gives a fuck, you know? Like, let's just stick with the majors, watch the best teams. And one of the things I will actually say, this is why I've done a lot of content with you, and I've actually done certain shows and referenced a lot of different things over the years, is if you went back in time 10 years and then went each year on, the reason why my opinions changed on a lot of my shows was actually from talking to you. And actually what I will say, which I think is very rare, is people do when things are political, it becomes tribal. It becomes like, right, it's our team. And then if you're not on our team, like, fuck those guys, they're the evil ones. And I can tell you, men and women both do this. There are men who just, they're not even willing to consider women's gaming. It's a waste of time. It's, they're not as good. There's a million angles people take, but I would say the sides are pretty clearly defined. And I would say you're one of the only people who actually, just on a human level, try to just talk to me about things or just tell me things like, oh, well, actually, here's, like I said, that thing I said earlier in the interview, you're the first person who ever told me that, who told me that, oh, no, wait, actually, the top women don't all think they're as good as the men, and they don't think they're like owed to be in the tournaments. So actually, we just want to have our tournaments, have our sport, and then we want a chance to compete in this. That goes a lot further, in my opinion, than slogans and things like that. So I would actually thank you for that. I think you did a very good job for the community in that sense.
I think that, you have your own reputation, obviously, Duncan, which sometimes you embrace, but you've always been someone that I've been able to talk to about these things. You've always been someone that I can actually have really a elevated conversation about any topics. Sometimes your delivery is really harsh on purpose.
Sure.
But at the core of it, I've always thought fundamentally you're quite often right. And when we had these conversations throughout the years, whether it's about diversity, women gaming, or whatnot, or any other topics, there was not one moment that we had these discussions where I thought, like, there's no point in talking with him because he doesn't get it. You always got it. We were always aligned because it just makes sense, right? Why would a company want to sponsor a woman in gaming? It just makes sense, And at some point, you can't really argue with logic, and you're always a really logical person. And you became, to me, someone that actually, maybe ironically for some people, you defended women in gaming in ways that a lot of the people in the community are not. And I'm really proud of the work that you've done for women in gaming. You showcase us in the right way. You don't bash us for no reason. You try to elevate the space the same way that you just said. You don't ask me, what is it like to be a woman gamer in the space? I don't think you've ever asked me that and throughout all of these years. You tell me about my experience, and then sometimes I'll slip a little bit of like, oh, well, I'm a woman, so it's hell. But,
sure.
But it's part of who I am. Unfortunately, I am a woman. I'm not gonna, I can't hide that fact. I chose the word fucking Miss Harvey when I was 16, and I still regret it to this day.
Right.
But it is what it is. I have the word Miss in my alias. And so I represent a certain demographic that I remember how you change, your opinion change. You say that, but I also remember how it was like 10, 15 years ago compared to now. And so, and for me, they say that you need to hear something 7 times
right,
for yourself to like change or like slightly open up. I feel that you heard these 7 times really early in your career. And that's when you started to like being able to open up. But that means that you talked about this with people at least 7 times. You were not like, fuck you, I don't want to hear about it. And I think that's important. That's why I don't say no. Because what if someone heard me 2 years ago and then they hear me say the same thing again, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is the second time I hear. Oh, that makes sense, But a year ago they were like, I fucking hate that bitch, So like, I feel that I also can make people evolve. And even though I'm not at the forefront of Counter-Strike like I used to be, I'm more behind the scene running things. I still try to come on. You said reflections. I think you asked me like last year or something, and I was like, yes, right away. And then like, you asked me again last week, and I was like, yes, absolutely. Like, I will take the time. I will move things because I know what you represent. I know people show up to your interviews, but also that you will represent people in a fair way when they also say yes to show up. And I've always said yes to your interviews because I think it's always great to talk to you. And we've talked to each other, yes, on these interviews, but also at events. People don't know behind the scenes, sometimes intoxicated. True. And we did have heated argument, but in the end, it makes us evolve. And you also made me change opinions on a bunch of things, like, as far as getting more educated in the space that you have more knowledge in. So yeah, it's been great to be one of your colleagues throughout all these years.
Sure. At the end of the interview, do you have a final message? Do you want to shout anyone out or say hello to anyone?
Well, I might have been brutally honest about some of the players and the people in this interview, but I do mean that I do want to say that and I mean it, when I truly cherished and love every single woman that competed with me and that was part of my journey. I think they're all wonderful people. I don't think I'm necessarily an easy person to play with, hang out with. Like, I'm very intense. The same for Christine and Alice. But I think that the battle is not won when it comes to our space being better. I just don't want to say just diversity, but just in general, like making our space better. Whether it is, I mentioned it, for journalists, for smaller tournaments, for like the way that game publishers are handling things, it's always going to be an ongoing battle. But I think for me, it's the battle that matters the most in my life. And with the amount of players and gamers there is in the world, it's something that we cannot shy away from in our current generation. Like, we can't just say it's just gaming anymore. We can't just say like things will figure itself out. They don't. They need initiatives. They need people supporting different things. They need people like us, like talking about how it was and where we're going from, and we're going next. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that is making a difference in this space. And also thank you to FlyQuest, because they really believed in the Red program. And honestly, I'm freaking proud of the work that we do at FlyQuest, not only on the surface where you guys see like a tweet, a meme, whatever, but behind the scene, we really mean it when we say we try to make this, like, our slogan, our mantra is try to make the gaming space better than we found it, right? And that's something that I truly believe in, and I wouldn't be at a company if I couldn't truly own it, because like I said, otherwise it wouldn't fulfill me. I need to be fulfilled in my work, and I feel that I can do that. And FlyQuest, and they gave a chance to a woman executive, which is just that means for a shit ton in this really shady environment that we sometimes live in. Thank you to you, because what the fuck, I get my own reflection.
Not bad.
I'm so excited. Like, this is so cool. Talking about my career is like therapeutic. It's therapeutic.
Right, one last thing to say then. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Duncan. It's always a pleasure.
They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back. And supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnaccio Racula, The Concept, Animosity, Bane Diesel, Ben Glass, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrutiny today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.